What is going on, everybody? Welcome in. I'm Howard Bender, sitting beside Eric Balkman, and it is time for the FFPC main event drafts live here in Las Vegas at Planet Hollywood. Eric, this has got to be one of the most exciting times. We are already in the midst of week one as the Thursday night game happened, but oh, baby, here we go. It is a draft bonanza here. How you doing today?
Doing good. Yeah, I've talked to a lot of players over the years, and they always refer to this as Christmas weekend, basically. Because you draft all season. Whether it's our mid stakes contest or just like our $35 best balls with the FFPC, and then you come out to Planet Hollywood for that main event draft, or maybe multiple main event drafts that people are excited to do. And then you unwrap your gifts, you find out who is your first round pick and how are you building your team as you're trying to win $1 million. Second straight year in the main event. We've got a $1 million grand prize, and I know everybody is so geeked up for it. Friday is probably usually our busiest day. We are slammed. We set a record for attendance this year at our viewing party, most drafts we've ever done out here. Obviously, you can see, I don't know how many draft boards we got set up in there right now at 15 or 20, and it's juiced. I mean, everybody's super excited and pumped, and we get a huge slate of NFL football tomorrow.
Oh, it's going to be absolutely dynamic here today and tomorrow during the games. And I'll tell you what, if you are here in Las Vegas, you better just head on over here to Planet Hollywood. The hallway walking in alone, just littered with draft boards from old main event drafts that have already taken place. I see the crew here. Everybody's walking in and out, studying the draft boards, looking at strategies, seeing who's stacking, seeing who's doing what. And I got to tell you, everybody is super pumped up. They also super pumped up to see you, Balky. I got to tell you.
Come on.
No. Come on. Don't be shy. Don't be coy about it here. People coming in here, shaking hands with you like they're running for political office or something like that.
Russell Wilson, right? The Russell Wilson aspect.
The kissing babies.
Kissing babies, pressing flesh. Yeah. It's exciting. Well, I mean, the other thing, too, is, while I get to see these players once a year, a lot of the players that come out here to draft live, they've established friendships over the years with everybody who's playing in this, and it's the one time they get to see each other too. So it's kind of a reunion of sorts, like an annual class reunion to come out here. Sometimes you get to sit at the same table and draft with these guys too. But yeah, I mean, it's crazy how big this has gotten. 16 years now for the FFPC. It's gotten bigger and hopefully better every single year. The walk in with the draft boards is pretty funny because you can look up stuff on the internet and get ADP and find out where people are going, but to actually draft live, it's a different animal. And when you see all these draft boards out here, to see where players are actually going when people are on the clock in front of 11 other teams, it's a little bit different. So yeah, people go over those with a fine-tooth comb. Not only do we have main event boards out there, but people like to study. We have like our $3,000 varsity league, our $5,000 big paybacks, our $10,000 high society. So like the highest of high rollers, what are they doing? Where are these players going in drafts? And then obviously after the Thursday night game, things got switched up a little bit too. Gibbs fell a little bit. Obviously, Kelsey fell a little bit once we found out he was going to be missing week one. Amon-Ra St. Brown got pushed up. It's fun every year to see how these draft boards change, starting with our drafts right after the Thursday night game and now going all the way through this evening.
You got to think that it's super disadvantageous, actually, to put so much stock into a first game, because when you see what happens on Thursday, we just got word right now from Dan Campbell that the snap count for Jahmyr Gibbs was low by design. Now, obviously, coming into the game, everybody had high hopes for Jahmyr Gibbs, and you served as a guest on the Fantasy Alarm Show, and we actually talked about it, and it was you speculated that Gibbs could actually pop up into that back end of the second round. So, when you turn around and you see what happened during the game, if you drafted, before you got word that this was actually by design, you could have been bypassing a superior talent. For the same token, though, a guy like Travis Kelce missing that game, to me, that doesn't matter. I mean, in a tight end premium format, when you're looking at a guy like Travis Kelce, and you heard that it was a bone bruise, that it wasn't going to be an extended absence for him, to me, that shouldn't have changed anything. If you're looking at Travis Kelce as a top 3 pick here in the FFPC main event championships, then, you stick with that.
I think you're right. However, I'll push back a little bit and say that there have been people who have been waiting for the demise of Travis Kelce as the not the 101, but the number one tight end, right? And how old is he now? 34, 30, something like that. So, and he's put up such elite numbers every single year. There are people out there that are like, one of these years the wheel's going to fall off.
Sure.
And now you have this bone bruise. Well, it shouldn't be a long-term thing, right? I mean, he could play next week and we forget all about this. But you think about how much older he's getting. He's not 26, 27 years old anymore. And now I think people are like, God, do I want to put my first round pick, even if I get him in the mid first round, do I want to put that kind of draft capital in him when I could get a young guy like Bijan Robinson, when I could get a young guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown, two guys that have been hyped up quite a bit out here in Las Vegas and our online drafts. I think it gives you a little bit of pause to draft a guy like Travis Kelce when you consider that this could be the year. I mean, I don't know. And then the other thing too is, like, Chiefs didn't look very good. I mean, they did not look good at all. And I know it's Patrick Mahomes and his receivers let him down quite a bit. But Howard, I thought that the Lions were like, you got to load up on them. This is before the game. You got to load up on them this year because I thought that defense was just terrible. Like, it's not going to be good. They're going to be in all these shootouts. Gibbs, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, Sam Laporta, another guy who climbed up after the Thursday night game. Like, these are the players that you should be investing in. And then Detroit's defense looked great. I mean, they looked very good on the road. First game of the season against the defending Super Bowl champs. I may have been wrong about the Lions defense.
I don't know if you're necessarily wrong about the Lions defense. I know that they'd made some improvements throughout the offseason. I was actually very surprised they traded Jeffrey Okudah over to the Atlanta Falcons. But no, I kind of feel like you're going to be onto something here. I mean, a first game in Arrowhead, you're all pumped up. Dan Campbell got everybody all rah and ready to dive in and
fighting kneecaps, doing everything.
Exactly. So, but I mean, we saw this a lot with Detroit last year as well. They started off. I mean, it was a great showing in week one, but you saw a couple of big shootouts that they had early on, and so. I do think that they are going to turn that around. If we are bullish on the Lions, let me ask you this one here. Jameson Williams, suspended for 6 games. Okay. He's got 5 more to miss right now. What do you think the people drafting here today are going to view as far as Jameson Williams goes? Because let's face it, yes, Chiefs defense was without Chris Jones, was without Charles Omenihu on the line, but they did still have a decent secondary, and the Lions look good against it. So now you're adding in that extra component there in Jameson Williams. How do the high stakes players react to that suspension?
It's been one of those things where he got pushed down after the suspension. Obviously, I have seen him move a little bit further up since Thursday, and I think the reason for that is Josh Reynolds actually had a pretty good game. And the compliment to Amon-Ra St. Brown, I mean, the perfect compliment is a guy like Jameson Williams who can really stretch the field for you. So I think he's moved up a little bit. I think he's going in about the 12th round right now, somewhere around there. And usually people are picking him as their fifth, maybe usually 6th receiver, sometimes 5th receiver. So you're not counting on this guy. You got to keep him on your roster for the first month and a half or whatever until he's ready to go. But I think while he moved up a little bit, the 2 risers obviously were Sam Laporta and David Montgomery. We haven't talked about either. And you touched on the Gibbs thing, that it was by design, that Dan Campbell said it was by design that Gibbs did not get a lot of touches, but Montgomery looked really good. And we were at the viewing party Thursday night here at Planet Hollywood. I had so many people come up to me and say, boy, was I wrong I got this Lions backfield wrong, because everybody was super on to Gibbs. And then obviously Montgomery got all the touches. I will say this about Gibbs, and I don't know, I'll get your opinion on this. Didn't he look like the part? I mean, he looked so much faster than like when he touched the ball, which granted we all wanted it to be more. I mean, he looked electric. He looked faster than anybody who was covering him. Anybody who was trying to tackle him, that was a tall task. I mean, so I think, like, while you're disappointed in the results, you got to be hyped up for the player evaluation, because I think we got that right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yards after contact. I mean, I don't know what the exact number was that Gibbs did put up, but I saw in a number of cases where he bounced off of defenders and stayed on his feet and was looking strong. And I was very impressed with what I did see. Listen, and I've said this throughout the preseason. I did have some concerns as far as Gibbs coming into this season. Everybody sat there hyping him up. He's a pass catcher. They're going to line him up in the slot. They're going to line him up on the outside. They're going to utilize him as a receiver. And that was the same stuff that we got about DeAndre Swift when the Lions first picked him up. And so my concern was, are we investing too high of a pick in a player who could become just a glorified third down pass catcher? What I did see from him contact wise, and after taking a couple of hits, I was definitely happier with all of that. But listen, this is one of my favorite shirts that I'm wearing right now. I don't want to flex because I don't want to rip it. But I will say this. I was 100% in on David Montgomery, and you can go back. You can listen to old Fantasy Alarm shows. You can go back and look at the content on the Fantasy Alarm website. I actually have Jahmyr Gibbs as one of my fades this season at his ADP because of David Montgomery. He came in. They brought him in. Listen, Jamal Williams had a phenomenal year last year with the Detroit Lions. Phenomenal. Short yardage back, great for the touchdowns, loved what he brought to the table. But what Jamal Williams doesn't bring to the table is the ability to catch passes. And while Montgomery was underutilized as a pass catcher in Chicago, what we did see was his ability to catch passes out in the flat, to run out in space. And I said, well, when they signed him, because they signed him to a 3-year deal, he's getting $6 million a year.
Let Williams go. That was the other thing. They let Williams go, and then they gave all that money to Montgomery.
They gave all of that money. Like, you're not paying a guy $6 million a year on a 3-year deal if you're not going to utilize him as such. So I said, yes, you can be all hyped up as you want about Jahmyr Gibbs, but if you're ignoring what Dan Campbell wants in a running back, and if you're ignoring what David Montgomery brings to the table, you're doing yourself a disservice, because Campbell does like the backfield rotation. And while, yes, we will see Jahmyr Gibbs' snap count increase as the season goes on, you cannot ever rule out David Montgomery. And for that reason, I'm very well invested in him. I believe I actually took him. I just did before I flew out here to Vegas, I did another Fantasy Pros Championship. And I made sure that I got myself a little David Montgomery in there. It's a nice little boost right here to start.
I'm actually looking up his ADP right now and how it's changed. So in the course of the last 24 hours with all the main event drafts we've done, which is a little bit more than 3 dozen with the FFPC, Montgomery has settled in at the end of the 6th round, which to me, I would think he'd go up a little bit more. He hasn't. He's still in the Rashad White, Miles Sanders, Alvin Kamara territory. Make a lot of good points about Montgomery here. And I think that when you, like, it's different when you're trying to win, and I know a lot of people watching, they're trying to win their local league with 9 other players, 11 other players. When you're trying to beat out thousands, right, in the FFPC main event, the Fantasy Pros Championship, whatever, you're looking for that potential league winning upside. And league winning upside to me is the players that can do things athletically on the field that the rest of the players can't. Gibbs to me represents one of those guys. Now, by that same token, because of the ADP, and I think that was always, like, I never doubted the talent with Gibbs and the draft capital that Detroit put in. It's very, very difficult for rookie running backs who are drafted that high to not have good rookie seasons. Knock on wood with injuries. But so I think that's the thing with Gibbs. With Montgomery, like, you could almost talk about potential league winning upside, not because of his athleticism, but because, for the same reason you might not like Gibbs because of his ADP, you might like Montgomery for his ADP because he's going so much later. And if he continues to get all these touches like he did against Kansas City, to get a guy like that in the late 6th round, that it's weird to say it, but that could be league winning upside. It's just in a different form.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And you said, when you talked about who's around him in ADP, Rashad White, I'm not in on Rashad White. I mean,
now, why is that? Like, because I know there's plenty of people who are.
That Tampa Bay offensive line, they lost Ryan Jensen for the season. They talked about the fact that it could be a career-ending injury for him. Their offensive line has not been strong. And they're dealing with major injuries. Losing your center is a huge thing. I mean, I think that's one of the more underrated things that a lot of fantasy players don't take into account. We break down the offensive lines on a regular basis over at Fantasy Alarm. I know you talk a lot about the offensive lines as well. And I think that's a huge problem here for Tampa Bay. They tried to build up that offensive line to protect Tom Brady, and that was great. But Tom Brady, I mean, it's a 2-step drop, and he's already released the football, so it's not as big a deal as far as the pass blocking goes. as far as a run blocking offensive line goes, I'm a little nervous about what they do. You've got Tristan Wirfs in there, but I mean, who else is on that offensive line? So, if I'm looking around that ADP, I'm definitely looking at Montgomery before I'm looking at a guy like Rachaad White. And you know what? You want to talk about league winners, guys who can do things after the fact. You brought up Alvin Kamara. So let's talk here for a second here. Mm-hmm. If Alvin Kamara's ADP is right around there, what about Jonathan Taylor? He's definitely missing 4 games. We don't know what's going to happen with him. Are the Colts going to trade Jonathan Taylor? Are they going to keep him tethered to that team? 4 games out for him, 3 out for Kamara. Both of these guys, I mean, let's just face it, from a talent standpoint. I mean, listen, I'll take Taylor over Kamara just because of the age and the mileage. But I mean, I think, these guys, you want to talk about fresh legs mid-season, that's what I'm here for.
Taylor is along with Cooper Kupp, those guys have been probably the biggest fallers, lately in drafts. And Taylor is, on the show, on my high stakes fantasy football show on Better Sports on Friday night, Matt Schell from Draft Sharks and I were talking about this. And I said, I facilitated a couple of drafts, a couple of high stakes drafts, a 5K and then a 3K. And Cooper Kupp went in the 4th round of one of them, and he went in the 8th round of another one. Like Jonathan Taylor, kind of same thing. Like he's all over the place. I'm looking at it right now. He settled in at the end of the 7th round, went as high as the early 6th round. He's gone as late as the 9th round. So he's kind of all like, you just don't know. We're dealing with such incomplete information. Let's talk about let's talk about the Irsay. Let's not talk about the Irsay angle.
Yeah, please no.
Let's not talk about the contract thing. All that aside, right? And then he's on the pup list. Like the ankle thing. I mean, even if he was happy, even if he got paid, would you still feel comfortable investing a high? And obviously, he'd be going a lot higher if he was playing right now. But are you concerned about the ankle for a guy who's got all that mileage, And he, by the way, he carried the ball a ton at Wisconsin too. And now you're talking about a player that, even if he was happy, Howard, I might still be out on him, that he's still dealing with this ankle after he had ankle surgery in the offseason.
Yeah, and that's definitely that's the question of whose story do you believe?
Right.
Do you believe that he is still dealing with that ankle injury, or is he using that as an excuse and saying, you know what, listen, until you guys settle out my contract, I can't put my ankle at risk. I just had surgery here. And so I'm going to bring myself along a little bit more slowly. I'm not going to push myself in camp while I'm trying to renegotiate with you guys. So, you do have to worry about that aspect. You have to worry about whether or not the ankle is he that slow to heal, or is this just a tactic? Now, I think that one of the things that happened, and again, I don't want to give Jim Irsay any more airtime, but, Irsay turned around and said, when he said that he was going to put Taylor on the NFI list, non-football injury list, because, Taylor complained about his back at some point. And, well, I'm sorry, but, you have a back injury. That's not football related. You haven't said anything about your back. So that's how we're going to get around this. And Taylor had to then turn around and say, well, no, it's not my back. It's my ankle. Right, so, I mean, it has been
that's a good point.
A very contentious back and forth with these guys, to the point where you don't know who to believe. Now, the question is, are you willing to take that shot here in the FFPC main event, or do you just let that become somebody else's headache? Because let's face facts. If you were to see Jonathan Taylor get traded and, land him somewhere, I don't know, Miami, Chargers, some team like that, where he'll fit, that the scheme works for him. I mean, that could be just downright explosive.
I think, and I asked Matt Schell for this. I'm like, what's the sweet spot for you for drafting Jonathan Taylor this weekend? He's like, there is no sweet spot. There's no sweet spot. Like, and he said, he didn't make it seem like he's like, some people say, oh, he's off my board completely. I'm not even looking at him, no matter the cost. But like to try to, I mean, it's a guessing game, right? Is another 7th round running back is that a better pathway to victory, right? Is Khalil Herbert a better pathway to victory? Is DeAndre Swift a better pathway to victory? Dalvin Cook, are these guys better than Jonathan Taylor in the 7th round when you bring everything into it, when you're trying to win $1 million? And that's the question that players have to answer. And it always seems like, looking at the faces, and which is something you can do live, but you can't do it online. But I'm looking at the faces at the draft board, and you can tell when it gets that early to mid 7th round, there's some wiping of brows, there's some furrowing of foreheads, like, just like, oh God, what are we doing here? Like, are we going to do it? And then I have not seen it yet where somebody announced with vigor, running back Jonathan Taylor. It's usually running back Jonathan Taylor. It's like one of those, like, nobody's excited about it. But, if he comes back off PUP in week 5 and what did Chris Ballard say? Relationships can be repaired. If the relationship is repaired, it's a massive value. Now the other aspect that we didn't talk about, what about the Anthony Richardson aspect, where this is a player that I don't think is going to be dumping off to running backs, no matter who it is, Moss or Jackson or Evan Hull or whatever. He is the biggest freak quarterback we have seen in NFL Combine history. To me, and I think a lot of people would say this as well, he gets into trouble, it's fight or flight, and he will take flight, and he'll just use his legs, right? So, and I think that kind of neuters Jonathan Taylor a little bit, because I don't know how many, not that he was ever this, extremely successful pass catcher, but I think that would neuter his fantasy viability as well, because he's not going to catch those passes this year.
No, he's not going to catch those passes. However, in a strong RPO offense, I think there's definitely going to be a lot of opportunity for him to be able to do that if he's running behind Anthony Richardson and can actually turn around and, get the ball and, obviously, and just kind of take up the sidelines. It's going to be very interesting to see. I'll say this about drafting Jonathan Taylor, and this is a strategy that I've employed, and it's something that I'm very curious. When we start interviewing all of these people here, and I'm super psyched to get a lot of these faces over here to the table and onto this broadcast. If you guys are tuning in right now, smash that like and subscribe button on the Better Sports Network YouTube page, on the Fantasy Alarm YouTube page. Does the FFPC have a YouTube page?
Oh, we absolutely do.
Oh, yes. Do smash that like and subscribe on that, and then spread the word to all your friends, because this is going to be a phenomenal day. We are here live from it's 10 to 1 Pacific time. So if I'm adding 3 hours, is that 1 to 4 on the East Coast? Yeah,
ding,
right
ding.
In the middle of your day here on a Saturday. What better way to spend your Saturday than to be tuning in right here to the FFPC Main Event Championships, Better Sports Network, Fantasy Alarm. We've got it all. But so, to the point here about Jonathan Taylor, and this is what I'll look at when I look at a bunch of the draft boards and see where he's gone. My feeling is if you've gone hero RB, and let's say you take 2 or let's say 3 running backs within your first 5 picks. Okay, when you get down to that 7th and 8th round, if you see Jonathan Taylor there, you can afford to grab him. Mm-hmm. If you like him over some of the wide receivers or some of the tight ends who are going there, I think that if you're going hero RB, or at least bully RB at some point, I think that's the way to go. If you're going heavy wide receiver, then no. Then the last thing I want to do is invest in a guy like Jonathan Taylor. So based on what we've seen here, or what you've seen in some of these drafts, I think that's something that we're going to have to take a look at for sure, as far as what running back, if you've drafted Jonathan Taylor or Alvin Kamara for that matter.
Sure.
Because let's all, Alvin Kamara, we saw the targets go down for him when Joe Lombardi headed over to the Chargers. Mm-hmm. And you were dealing with just, Carmichael dealing with his offensive scheme. And it was, slightly shifted away from the pass catching running back aspect there. Guys like Taylor, guys like Kamara, if that is my, if I only have like 1 or 2 running backs at that point, then there's no way I'm going to those guys.
I will say that there are people that will take multiple shots at the main event. And while, the bully RB aspect of, bringing Jonathan Taylor aboard is, and the other thing we should mention too, at the FFPC, you have 2 flexes. So you could start 4 running backs if you wanted.
Which I love.
Wait, exactly.
I love that.
So the aspect of like, if I take Taylor in the 7th and he doesn't work out, it doesn't hurt me as much as if I take a player, that high risk player in the 2nd or 3rd round, where if he busts, it really kills my team. Now, there are going to be people that will tell you that they'll draft the running, let's say like Eckler or something in the 1st round. Maybe they get Mark Andrews in the 2nd round and then just pound out receivers, right? Receiver. So now heading into, like the 7th round or again, sometimes the 8th round, 9th round where Taylor's going, they are loaded up at receiver. They have an elite tight end. If they want to wait on court, maybe they grab like Trevor Lawrence or something. So they're set at quarterback too. They can look at the aspect of like, okay, I'm really hurting at running back here, but I'm loaded everywhere else. Maybe I go for broke. Maybe I take Taylor as my second running back here. And if he pans out, holy God, I'm going to be in the championship round at the top of the leaderboard. Big risk. I don't know if a lot of people would do that, but I can see volume players, people taking multiple shots at the main event, trying something like that out just to see what happens. And I think it'd be pretty compelling to follow that team.
It should definitely be compelling to follow that team. But for the same token here, Balky, do you remember the name of the person who came in second?
No, I don't. And that, what's crazy about it, and like you have to get hot, right? Because the way the main event is structured is you have that 3-week championship sprint at the end of the season. So you want to get in the biggest thing is getting into the championship round, and then anything can happen. The guys who won it last year, actually repeat champions of the FFPC main event. Never thought I'd see it ever, but it happened. Don Baragni, Sean Stutzman, and Nick Cosentino, they won it 2 years in a row. The reason they won it last year, and I'm going to butcher this because I can't remember who it was, but it was the first week of the championship round, and they had Bam Knight in their starting lineup.
Okay.
The last second, they subbed him out for another running back, and it was I shouldn't have brought this up because I can't remember the running back.
Was it Brian Robinson?
No, I don't think it was Brian. It was somebody. Maybe it was a Chiefs running back that blew up that week, or no, you know who it was? I think it was Zay Jones from the Jaguars.
Okay.
And they subbed Knight out, and they put Jones in, and that was, he had like 8 for 122 touchdowns or whatever it was. They went from like 50th place in the main event all the way up to first because of that, because nobody else had Jones going. And it was just, they were ready to go with Knight. And I think it was Nick that said, guys, let's do Jones instead. Sure enough, it worked out, and they never gave up the lead. They won it, 2 years, which is incredible. But the point is here, like, you got to get to the championship round, and then anything can happen. Remember Arlen Harris many years ago for the Rams, the running back there. Like, that guy gets picked up just as, we'll see what happens. Maybe gets an opportunity. He gets the opportunity when Steven Jackson goes down, and he carries people to fantasy glory. Jamal Charles had that 50-plus point week in week 15 or 16, however many years ago that was. And that, changed everything. More recently, Alvin Kamara, the 6 touchdown game. Was that No, it wasn't Thanksgiving. It was Christmas.
It was it was after Thanksgiving, and I don't really want to talk very much about that because that, I'm not going to say that it knocked me out of the playoffs when having to face Kamara in multiple leagues. But yeah, I get what you're saying. Listen, I did coverage of so it was an MLB All-Star fantasy football draft, and it was a bunch of guys from the Braves. Eric Hinsky from the Braves.
Sure.
He was he
is from Eric Hinsky is his hometown is literally a 5-minute drive from me.
Oh, perfect.
In Northeast Wisconsin. How wild is that?
So, you know what? I can text him right now. Yeah. We can talk about it because he runs this league, and it's all these ex-Braves, Chipper Jones, Brian McCann, all of these guys are in it. And last year they have all these bonuses set up for theirs. And so it's, it's obviously it's a different
like weekly bonuses or
no, like 20 carries, you get a 3-point.
Oh, I see
bonus.
What you're saying. Okay. Got it.
25 carries, you get that 3-point bonus plus another 3-point. And so all of a sudden, big games like that happen. And I was talking to Brad Lidge, who won because of Brian Robinson, because the tail end of the season during the playoffs, Brian Robinson was like getting 20 carries, 25 carries in a game. So having those guys now, let me ask you this one here, because this is actually another interesting thing. That 3-week playoff championship for the FFPC, that in the main event, that comes when? Weeks 13, 14,
no.
15?
It'll be 15, 16, 17 for 15, the championship 16, round. 17. Yeah. So, basically you'll have your regular league where you play every team in your league, and then we have an all play in week 6. That's the first 12 weeks of the season. Weeks 13 and 14 are your league playoffs, and then 15, 16, 17, 3-week sprint.
So it's the league playoffs then that become an ordeal with the bye weeks.
Yes, exactly. And that's why it's so important and I don't know. I feel like initially, because this has been going on for a while, and people say, well, why does the FFPC have their playoffs during bye weeks? Well, listen, we don't have a direct line to the NFL. As much as I'd love to be able to speak to Roger Goodell, they're going to do what they're going to do. We just got to kind of react to it. So we were never going to change our format based on maybe we'll change it, and then the NFL changes something next year, and then we have no idea. So initially, I think a lot, not the majority. There was a a significant plurality of players that were upset about it. But what can they do? Well, they can avoid drafting those players that are on bye week. Now that we have been doing this for the last few years, I don't really have anybody like super ticked off about it. Like if you don't like it, they just don't draft those players. I think a lot of people now look at it as kind of an advantage because sometimes those players slip a couple of spots and then you can capitalize on that. I've had a lot of people tell me like, look, it's a long season. I don't have to worry about it till week 13. I have 12 weeks to find a replacement player for that guy who's going to be on bye or those guys that are going to be on bye. I'll figure it out. And most people have. So I think like, that, yes, it is concerning, but I feel like over the years, it's become less concerning for players, especially when you consider that it's the league playoffs and not the actual championship round. The league playoffs are, I mean, if you are a top 2 seed in your league, you're automatically in the championship round. Those league playoffs matter if you're the 3rd or the 4th seed, because then you got to win your way in.
Right. Okay, that definitely makes sense. All right, I'm scrolling through some bye weeks here because I find this to be incredibly interesting when you start looking at certain things. Here we go. In week 13, if you are vying for that championship, Buffalo. So, I mean, Josh Allen, bye-bye. In Chicago, you could have Justin Fields. Vegas, Josh Jacobs, Devontae Adams. Minnesota, how about Justin Jefferson and Kirk Cousins? That
Madison
whole grouping right there.
Yeah,
Alexander Madison. Yeah. The Giants, you could be without Darren Waller. In Baltimore, you've got Lamar Jackson and you've got Mark Andrews. So week 13 is definitely a tight spot to be. And then week 14, they give you the break. Arizona and Washington. If you're invested, chances are, if you're invested heavily in Arizona and Washington, you're not competing for your players.
I'm even trying to think, like, out of those two teams, who is the highest drafted player? I mean, I don't even know who it would be.
Terry McLaurin
or Dotson. Dotson actually, and that's interesting. We haven't talked about that yet. But I think Dotson is a guy that has actually moved ahead in ADP in front of McLaurin, not by much. But over the McLaurin's back in front of him. I take that back because now he is playing, right?
They did declare that he was back. You know what? I mean, how do you feel about that? Listen, we all know how nagging turf toe can be. And as soon as they start talking about turf toe, it always makes me a little bit nervous. Now, I love Terry McLaurin. I think phenomenal talent. We don't know what to expect really from Sam Howell. I know that DFS players right now are loading up on GPP lineups with Sam Howell because of what that can get you. And now that he's got Terry McLaurin in there, I think that they're, very bullish on that, especially with this matchup against Arizona. But for the same token, when you're dealing with a guy who's got that current injury right now, playing or not, I mean, how many times have you seen a guy who's like, all right, yeah, he's playing, and then all of a sudden, halfway through the game, he re-aggravates it and he sits?
We call that a James Conner. That's basically what it is.
James Conner.
He's like the king of like, oh, this is going to be a great matchup for him, and then mid-second quarter hurts his shoulder. He's at halftime. We get the report from the silent reporter. James Conner will not return to the game because of a quad or whatever it is. So, I think that there has been a lot of talk over the years of, and I hear it a lot more this year. Don't draft players who are already hurt coming into the season. There are examples, and that's advice I've followed from my own leagues for a decade plus. There are examples of players who were hurt in the preseason and he got faded, but then week one they're right as rain, and then I think Maurice Jones-Drew had a season like that where he was dealing with a leg issue or something, and he actually fell to the latter part of the second round, I think. But anybody who gobbled him up there loved it because week one he was balling, right? And I think there are examples of that, but by and large, Howard, like it's tough for me to get on board unless I'm getting a significant discount, drafting a player who is already hurt, and like you just said. Like turf toe is not something that goes away overnight. Right. That's the issue. So if that's the case, and I think that's even prior to the injury with McLaurin, as we talk about the Commanders receivers here, I had a lot of people tell me, and I saw it in drafts too, Jahan Dotson, everybody thought was going to be the breakout guy this year. And that by the end of the year, he could be the number one over McLaurin. I think that's going a little bit too far, but there's a non-zero chance of anything, as I usually like to say. Dotson is a first-round pick, so he obviously has the draft pedigree. He is going back-to-back right now with McLaurin. McLaurin, wide receiver 29, Jahan Dotson, wide receiver 30, early to mid-6th round is where they're going right now. For me, I was like, okay, well, that's fine if you believe in Dotson. But if you're going to, draft McLaurin or Dotson, don't you have to believe in Sam Howell? And now I see Sam Howell getting drafted. And he's as a backup quarterback in these 20-round drafts that we have here. So I think there's a lot of people that are excited about the Commanders' offense this year. I think I had somebody tell, and I can't remember who it was, but somebody telling me yesterday, like, I can't believe Sam Howell slipped as far as he did in the NFL draft. Like, this guy he's a talent. Like, and the fact that, and then he went on to say, like, I wish I had more shares of him, but when I saw all the money that they gave Jacoby Brissett, I was like, okay, maybe I can't afford to invest a whole lot on Howell. And then they made him the starter, and it looks like he's going to be good to go. But McLaurin versus Dotson, I think, is one of the more compelling decisions that people are going to have to make this weekend, because both are available at roughly the same spots. You kind of have to, if you're planting your flag on a Commander's receiver, it's going to have to be one or the other. You can't get both.
You definitely, unless you're unless you're picking on the turn and they both happen to be sitting
and then
there.
You could. Yes,
and then you just double tap them. I mean, you've got to be a really big believer in Sam Howell. But you bring up a phenomenal point here. A phenomenal point. When people are all in on these high-end receivers, and they're putting in a lot of fantasy draft capital in them, like, the perfect example to me is if Tyreek Hill is a first-round pick and Jalen Waddle is a second-round pick, why are you not investing in Tua? Now, I get it. Okay, fine. You're worried about Tua and the concussions, but then turn around and handcuff him to Mike White, for crying out loud. Because if you've got the reason that Teddy Bridgewater didn't work out for Miami last year is because Teddy Bridgewater can't throw deep.
Mm-hmm.
But now you brought in Mike White, who we saw how he replaced Zach Wilson last year with the Jets. Miami brings him in. He's got the arm to take it deep. He's got a good, strong pocket presence. He can roll out and he can extend plays with his legs a little bit.
And he put up big numbers in several spots last year.
Yeah,
too. Like, he's done it.
So why? So if you're gonna tell me that you're all in on a guy like Tyreek Hill, and you're gonna be all in on a guy like Jalen Waddle, how you can't sit there and tell me that Tua is a 10th or an 11th round pick. You just can't, you can't dismiss him like that. And I think that that's something that a lot of people are doing in a lot of drafts. And, Sam Howell is another perfect example of that. You could also talk about, the Desmond Ridder, Taylor Heineke situation in Atlanta, because if you're putting stock into Kyle Pitts and you're putting stock into Drake London, well, I mean, somebody's got to throw him the ball.
Right. And this, I think this started for me, the wake-up call was back when Larry Fitzgerald was a second-round pick, Anquan Bolden was a third-round pick, and Kurt Warner was like in the 18th. Yeah. Like, and I'm like, why? Something is not right here. And then, sure enough, Warner ended up blowing up. Might have won the MVP that year. I can't remember. And then to a lesser degree, there was a few years ago, Plaxico Burress was like a third rounder, fourth rounder, and then Victor Cruz was going off in like the second or third. Yet Eli Manning was the 14th or 15th quarterback off the board. And it's like, okay, something is not right here. With the main event, like, it's not best ball, so I think you'll see less stacking in this. But I have seen people, grab Hill or Waddle. I don't think I've seen anybody get both of them, but they'll get Tagovailoa. And Tagovailoa is either the backup quarterback for them, or if they draft Tagovailoa as their starter, then they're going to hit Cousins or Geno Smith or somebody like that late. Or not late, but in the mid rounds. Like, those are the players that we see often stacked with Tagovailoa. So, and the thing is, it's like, you can get away with him getting hurt if you have a guy who's a fringe top 12 quarterback. Then at that point, like, it doesn't kill you. It's nice to have the stacking. Like, if Hill I saw a stat the other day that Tagovailoa was like the most accurate deep ball passer in the NFL last year, something to that effect. And I had to scratch my head, like, wow, I can't imagine that. Well, this will be great for Tyreek Hill, right? And what did he do last year? 1,700 yards or whatever. That should continue this year. As long as he stays on the field, I don't see any reason why that doesn't continue.
Yeah. Oh, listen, I mean, I think a lot of people are doing a major disservice to ignoring Tua in drafts and DFS, everything like that, because, I mean, look at what that Miami offense was doing last year before he got hurt. I mean, it was high octane. And I know that, okay, now Mike McDaniel likes to rotate in his running backs, and you're not really, you want somebody stronger in the backfield just to help take some of the pressure off. But, for that token, man, I mean, that offense was just absolutely humming. And I think that that's a a great spot to be in. Absolutely. Let me ask you this, because we're hitting news items here. We're hitting what we think people are looking at as far as the FFPC and the main event and everything that's going on here today, which is super exciting. I can catch like out of the my view here, stickers going on boards, and I'm like getting all goosebumps and super excited about that. Eric Balkman, who are you invested in this year?
So
there you go.
This is a great segue. So we were just talking about the Dolphins. I draft the majority of my teams. Obviously, as an employee of the FFPC, I can't draft out here, but I draft the majority of my teams in the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship the weekend before Memorial Day. Okay, a big thing in Louisville every year, and it's a lot of FFPC players will actually attend that, because it's good prep for the live events out here. So I drafted 12 teams in Louisville a couple weekends ago. And, I'm tired, and I'm basically doing like 4 or 5 drafts every day, and like it blurs together. But I always write down all my players, and then I'll look at the rosters on the plane ride home. I could not believe how many shares of Devon Achane I drafted.
Wow.
It was, my God, he's like my 3rd or 4th running back on every single team. And I said when I got home, if anything happens to Achane, like it's bad news. And then he obviously was dealing with the shoulder injury, which I think he's going to be okay there. The big thing for me was that self-imposed Colts Taylor trade deadline day. And once I got past that, I'm like, okay, now I feel better about this. That is probably a player that I know I'm overweight on him. That significantly, that is the biggest player I'm invested in. I do want to touch on what the Dolphins have done under Mike McDaniel. And I think you could see the Green Bay Packers doing this, and really the NFL in general. Speed is like, you can't acquire enough of it. It seems like everybody wants speed. Like strength is good. That's fine. Athleticism, flexibility, versatility is good. But man, you can't coach speed. And the Dolphins have so much of it. I think a big reason that the Green Bay Packers were held back last year was because of how slow they were. I mean, everybody on that team was so slow. Lazard and Tunyon and Cobb. And like now you have Watson and you have Dobbs and Jaden Reed and Luke Musgrave, who I love. It almost seems like the smart teams in the NFL are shifting to drafting all this. Speed used to be like a dirty thing in fantasy, right? Because it's like, oh, well, tell me about this guy. Oh, he's really fast. Okay, well, to me, if that's the first thing you're bringing up, this is going to be a guy who's running wind sprints and maybe catches the occasional 40-yard pass, right? It's not the case anymore. Like you have to be fast. The days of the Brandon Marshall 6'4", 230-pound box out receiver, yeah, there's still some around, but it's not as prevalent as it was, And like now it's all about speed and stretching the secondary, because it opens things up for the running game. I just think that the Dolphins this year, when they can go and pound you with Raheem Mostert, first and second down, and then all of a sudden you get Achane in there for a series, and you saw the clip how pumped Mike McDaniel was.
Oh yeah,
when they drafted Achane. I'm like, okay, this guy he's going to factor in. It's going to be such a great literally a great change of pace player for to put Achane out there, similar to kind of how Gibbs was. Like you can just tell those guys, they're moving faster than everybody, or than the majority of everybody else out there. And that's what makes them so attractive for fantasy, because they can do things that other players cannot. And I think the NFL is shifting to that as well.
I agree with you. And, there's something in the water down there in Florida, because I'm pretty overweight on the Jacksonville Jaguars this year.
Oh yeah.
Because they have that also. You bring in a receiver like Calvin Ridley, who I saw an interview with him the other day, and they were talking about Ridley and what it's going to be like working with Trevor Lawrence. And he cited working with Matt Ryan at the beginning of his career and how much that's helped him now doing that. But Ridley's got speed. Zay Jones has speed. Christian Kirk has speed. Even Evan Engram, as far as he's not a plodding tight end, he is definitely a runner. And Travis Etienne. Now they did turn around and they grabbed Tank Bigsby, and that's their plotter, short yardage guy in there. But that's another team right there that has built their offense around that kind of a speed aspect of it. And I think that's another team that's, a lot of people are bullish on, or maybe it's just me. I don't know. Well, I mean, I've got a lot. I've got a lot of Trevor Lawrence and Jaguars.
And that makes sense. Let me ask you this, because people have asked me, who is your big bust this year? Who's your big early round bust? And I have this guy on one team, and I've brought this up with so many players, so many analysts, and I haven't. I maybe we've talked about it. I can't remember, but Calvin Ridley is one guy. It's so tough for me after what I saw from Deshaun Watson last year, where he missed basically a year and a half and then just came back and looked super rusty. Calvin Ridley kind of a similar situation. Now, I read his Players Tribune thing. I'm rooting for him. Like I clearly this is a guy who's dealt with much more than just a gambling suspension, and I want him to be successful. However, again, maybe the Watson thing is poisoning my mind, and I just can't get out of my head. I can't invest. Where is he going? Like mid-second round, late second round. For me, it's such a struggle to invest in a player that's missed that much time, who goes to a new offense, new head coach, new OC, new quarterback, new everything, where they had two players last year in Kirk and Engram that had fantastic seasons. It's been very difficult for me to wrap my head around taking Ridley in the second round because of all those factors. He's probably like my biggest, bust this year. I could be wrong about it, and if I'm wrong, then so be it. But
no, listen, I have a lot of shares of Ridley from drafts that I did back in June and
when he was
July,
super cheap, right?
And he was fifth, sixth round, and fifth, sixth round. I'm all in for that. But yeah, as he moved up more and more, and he became a third round pick, I started to, kind of fall off. Now I'm 100% in on Trevor Lawrence, and so what I did was all my pairings are Trevor Lawrence and Christian Kirk, or maybe I looked at Zay Jones super late, but as the hype machine has gone up, and I'm all about that. When I'm getting a player at a discount, I'm happy with that, and I'll take that. But all of a sudden,
regardless of who it is, too,
right.
It's all about the ADP, especially when you're building a portfolio.
But when that hype machine starts up and these players start to get that steam, and that steam starts to rise even more, I immediately start pivoting off of them, because I'm looking at I'm definitely looking at other players who have, whatever, less risk, in that aspect. Not, listen, I'll go Bijan Robinson in the first round all day, every day. But, like Ridley for the stuff, for the time missed and everything like that, for him to become a third round pick, because you're drafting him at his ceiling. And, that's always a tough thing to do when you're drafting somebody at their ceiling. You don't want to, be able to do that. You're not getting the draft value that you want.
Are you on? Let's continue in the Jaguars conversation. Travis Etienne, running back 12, end of the third round. How concerned are you? We talk about investing a high pick into Ridley, drafting him at his ceiling. When you talk about Etienne, is that his ceiling at the end of the third round? It comes down to, like, what kind of role do you think? We know it's been talked about with Tank Bigsby, but we have to see it first. How have you been treating Etienne in the late third?
I have no Etienne this year. I have no Etienne at all. And I'll tell you why. One of the most compelling stats for me, because first and foremost here, I was so super bullish on the Jaguars last year when Doug Peterson got hired, because I was like, all right, great. We're past the Urban Meyer stuff. I'm going to give every single one of these players a mulligan, and I'm going to turn around and I'm going to, invest in them, because I'm investing in the system. I'm investing in a proven winning scheme. Doug Peterson comes off of that Andy Reid tree, and we already know what kind of offense that leads to. And so I was very bullish on that. Travis Etienne had 5 touchdowns last year?
Something like that, yeah.
1 touchdown came inside the green zone. 1. And so that to me is a very, very compelling stat. So when you draft a guy like Tank Bigsby, and you're big on Tank Bigsby, like the Jaguars coaching staff is, that tells me that once you get down there inside that 10-yard line, you're not looking at Travis Etienne. You're not looking to take it to the outside and move it upfield. What you're looking for is a guy who can bulldog through the tackles and make sure that, he hammers that defensive line. And so for me, Travis Etienne at that price tag, after seeing, so many limited touches inside that green zone, that turns me off from him.
I think, and not that Bigsby's part of the running back dead zone. I look at the running backs this year in general in the FFPC main event, and I'm looking at the ADP over the last day, 24 hours worth of drafts.
Can we tell everybody where that ADP is that you're finding?
Do you want me to? It's up to you.
Plug that, dude. Right, plug that, because I know Fantasy Mojo. I love me Fantasy Mojo. I had Fantasy Mojo actually on the Fantasy Alarm show.
He's out here by the.
I know. I spoke to him.
Oh, you did? Okay, good. Yeah. You know what he's doing is he has his own gear. Like, I was wearing my Pros versus Joe's Fantasy Mojo sweatshirt yesterday. And another guy I was talking to, Peter St. Pierre, who's actually a longtime FFPC player, was wearing his Fantasy Mojo shirt. Never met Darren Armani before. Darren comes up to him and says, "Hey, I like that shirt. Where'd you get that?" Oh yeah, I got it from Fantasy Mojo. He's like, "Yeah, that's me." And but at the viewing party every single year, everybody, like the person I get asked about the most, like, "Hey, is Darren Armani here? I really want to talk with him. I want to meet him." But yeah, all the ADP I cite is from fantasymojo.com.
The work that he does on the ADP for the FFPC main event is absolutely phenomenal. And not just the main event, he does it for everything.
He does it for everything. And then he has like the stack finder on there. So like when you're doing a draft, like, okay, how unique am I here? Like, it's fantastic what he does. Really good stuff. At Fantasy Mojo on x.com, fantasymojo.com. Okay, running back dead zone. Is the running back dead zone dead? Because I look at, like, last couple of years, you wanted to get at least one of those elite guys, like one of the top 12, top 15, maybe 2 top 15 runners, because it dried up so much. But now I look at like the dead zone this year. I think that there's David Montgomery, Miles Sanders, Alvin Kamara, like all players that are going in that dead zone. Like, I think there's value there, like more value than we've seen before in previous years. I wonder, I was thinking about this the other day. I'm like, I wonder if we can, bury the running back dead zone because it now is dead.
Well, I think there's actually more of a wide receiver dead zone now than there is a running back dead zone. I definitely think that way because a lot of people are, they're taking, I mean, you see the draft capital that people are investing in a lot of these wide receivers. And yeah, once you get closer and closer to the season, you start seeing some more running backs kind of trickle into that first round. But for the most part, every draft that I've done since June, I would say, has been so overloaded in wide receivers that once you start getting into the 5th, the 6th round, the wide receivers who are available at that point, you're just like, boo. I don't really know if I want to invest over in that spot. Like that's why, because I was so into Calvin Ridley being down that far in the 5th, the 6th round, because I was going hero RB or bully RB early, and he was available to me, where now it's like you look at the wide receivers who are in the 5th and 6th round. Find that wide receiver dead zone for me right here on fantasymojo.com.
So like, I think there's some, I think once you get to like that Jerry Jeudy, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Mike Evans, although I'll tell you this, Jordan Addison has been being pumped up the last couple of days. He's moved up into the 7th round. I think him and Zay Flowers are kind of the exception there. But then you're looking at Gabe Davis, Michael Pittman, Cortland Sutton. You're looking at all these guys.
Whoa. Don't speak ill of Cortland Sutton. I'm going to stop you right now.
Now, here's the issue with Sutton.
Tell me.
There's been a lot of pub about Sutton this year that he looks so much more athletic. He's flying by the cornerbacks. He's making all these plays or whatever. But we have not seen him, successful on an NFL field in a real life game for several years now. And I think there's so many people that are pumped up about Jerry Jeudy and obviously him dealing with the injury. I think he's going to play right on Sunday. Did we get word on that?
I haven't. He's still questionable.
Okay. All right. So obviously if he doesn't play, then yeah, wheels up for Sutton. But like, I think there are so many people that have been let down by Sutton over the years that the shine has kind of worn off on him, but not for you.
Not for me. And I'll tell you exactly why. 100%.
Sean Payton. Is that why?
It's more Joe Lombardi than it is Sean Payton.
Yeah.
And let's talk about the offensive scheme, and let's talk about Sean Payton with Joe Lombardi and what we've seen. The X receiver in that system gets funneled targets on the regular. You look at Marquez Colston, you look at Michael Thomas, you look at what the target share has been from Mike Williams over the last 2 seasons for the Chargers with Joe Lombardi there. Joe Lombardi features that X receiver. Now, that's not to say that Jerry Jeudy isn't going to thrive in the system as well. We saw Keenan Allen last year and the year before, who was still perfectly fine. Yes, he's a security blanket, but you can go back and you can look at guys who work primarily out of the slot in New Orleans. You remember Lance Moore?
Oh yeah.
Remember Lance Moore? Lance Moore the dude had 900 yards and a 10 touchdown season as the slot receiver, sitting next to Marquez Colston. And this is what the system does. And this is why I'm so adamant about talking about, all the coaching movement and all the coaching schemes. We have 16 new offensive coordinators this year. We have 15 new defensive coordinators this year. We have 5 new head coaches this year. if you don't understand the system that's being implemented, and again, that's why I was ahead of the curve last year on the Jaguars. And people were like, oh, the Jaguars, they suck. Oh my God, Urban Meyer ruined them. But you put Doug Peterson in there with a proven system, and we see how they fly. So now you've got that in Denver. Now I am a little nervous about this, Russell Wilson kissing babies and, Sean Payton basically having to tell him to, get your head on straight and focus up on what we need to do here. Stop being a glam boy. Let Sierra or whatever her name is, let her take care of all of that stuff. You need to play some football here. But the way the system is organized, yes, Courtland Sutton is going to see a boatload of targets. I think his target rate will go up this year. I actually want Judy on the field this week. I really do, because Judy on the field is going to keep the coverage, spread out a little bit more. You're not going to be able to sit there and like pile on to poor little, Courtland Sutton, because what's going to happen is once you start seeing those targets funneled over his way, then suddenly you start floating safety help over his way if he's beating the corner. But if you've got Jerry Jeudy on the field and Marvin Mims, another guy who's getting a lot of steam,
that's the other aspect we should talk about too. Finish your thought on Sutton, and then we should talk about Mims.
I think my thought on Sutton speaks for itself right there.
Okay, so what
draft him?
So exactly, and by the way, wide receiver, what I say, wide receiver 40, something like that right now for wide receiver 40,
such a bargain.
Mid 8th round for Courtland Sutton.
Yum.
I have a friend who I drafted against in Kentucky, from Fantasy and Frames, Stacy Perez, who is all about Marvin Mims, to the point where I was in a draft with her and I felt guilty about drafting Mims because I thought she was going to physically attack me. She loves him that much. And she's not the only one, Howard. I mean, there's a ton of people that have steamed up Marvin Mims. I'm going to look at the ADP right now as far as where he's going. Wide receiver 52 in the 11th round. So this is a receiver who, ostensibly is the number 3 wide receiver, potentially the number 4 option on that offense. And he is basically going at that turn, like right when the second half of the draft starts. That's when Mims is going off as a player being drafted. And I wonder, like, obviously the Mims thing isn't affecting you on Sutton at all.
No, not at all, because Mims plays an entirely different role, and Mims will end up being the Z receiver in 3 receiver sets. Mims will be on the right, Sutton will be on the left. You got Jeudy working out of the slot. This is exactly the offense that Joe Lombardi runs. So, yeah, I think it's going to be great. I mean, listen, we saw this, again, if you want to equate it to a team most recently, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, and then they had Joshua Palmer, who came in on 3 receiver sets, and Palmer had some good moments. Mims will have some good moments, but that's not like, I'm not overly investing in a guy like Marvin Mims. Mims, just like Jaden Reed, is getting that late steam. When Tim Patrick went down and was lost for the season, all of a sudden, everybody started, all the Mims grumbling started. And all of a sudden you started to see him go from being completely undrafted to now all of a sudden he was a late round pick. Then Jeudy with the hamstring issue. And then all of a sudden everybody was, all in on Marvin Mims. And this is, now carrying up. We're seeing the same thing here with Jaden Reed with Green Bay, because with Christian Watson out, everybody, I mean, how many times have you looked on X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it right now? And all of a sudden, you just see it's Jaden Reed season.
Oh yeah, totally.
SZN.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, I'm noticing it in the drafts out here with the FFPC main event, 13th round now for Jaden Reed, for an offense that is like, granted, like I'm a Packers fan, but I'm still cautiously optimistic on this offense. It's not a team I want to be loading up with players on. But Reed, and Dobbs is probably going to play, but he was dealing with an injury too. And Reed has made a lot of plays in training camp and in the preseason with Jordan Love out there too. So I think Reed's an interesting guy because of the issues, and Watson and Dobbs, I don't want to call them injury prone, but they both missed significant time last season as well. So I think there's that. And then when you have the how complimentary Luke Musgrave and Jaden Reed are, Luke Musgrave is a guy I have a ton of too. I think he is going to be phenomenal this year as a rookie tight end. I think that the 2 tight ends that were really moving up boards over the last week or two were Sam Laporta and Luke Musgrave. Musgrave especially because he was going much further down than Sam Laporta. But I've seen really accomplished players out here drafting Luke Musgrave as a backup tight end in the middle part of the draft. So I think that with the Packers this year with Reed. He's an intriguing guy. Musgrave's an intriguing guy. Dobbs is. The great thing about those offenses or about that offense, players on that offense, you don't have to invest unless it's Watson. You don't have to invest a lot into getting a piece of it. And if Jordan Love has a good season, I think he's going to be all right. I don't think he's going to be great, at least year one. But if he has a decent season, then those players are going to pay off for you.
Those players could definitely pay off for you. I'll tell you what, we're gonna take a quick time out here. Now we're at the FFPC Players Championships, the main event right here at Planet Hollywood in Las Vegas. This league, ladies and gentlemen, is tight end premium. So how much does that affect the draft capital for tight ends? We've seen where the top guys are going. We see where Kelsey goes. We see where Hawkinson goes. But let's talk a little bit more further down that list. When we come back, we'll dive into the tight end position and what you want to do when you're making a draft, when you're doing the draft with tight end premium scoring. So stick around. There's lots more to go here. He's Eric Balkman. I'm Howard Bender. You're listening to live coverage of the FFPC main event championships here in Las Vegas on the Fantasy Alarm Network, on the FFPC YouTube page, and, of course, Better Sports Network. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Oh, boy, we got a big one. We got a big card here. We got
baby, let's go.
We got a super rookie.
Ooh.
Do you guys want to guess who the big card super rookie is? Because
I'm going to guess somebody from the Dallas Cowboys, but I don't recall who were rookies in those particular years. So I'm going to guess Michael Irvin.
Adam?
Jared kind of convinced me to go Troy Aikman there.
I'm going to read the description. In this player's NFL debut, September 10th, 1989, he produced an electrifying 68-yard punt return for a touchdown.
Sanders.
He became the first athlete in the 20th century to hit a home run, September 5th, 1989, for the Yankees at Seattle, and score a touchdown in the same week.
That needs a sleeve. That one needs a sleeve.
Top 100%. Super rookie, neon, prime time, Deion Sanders.
I wasn't that far off. He played for the Cowboys.
I was going to say Deion, and then when you said the early 90s Cowboys, I'm like, oh, Aikman would be a good guess. So I go with your gut is the lesson there.
And there it is, the white and red Falcon jerseys that you said Deion came in with before they changed to black.
That was because the starting lineup for Deion his rookie year has got the red helmet with the white jersey.
Now look at that do. I mean, are you kidding me with that hair?
I mean, you got to have a headband with those curls. You got to.
That is sick. And this is a favorite card. Do we have any value on this card? We have to, right?
Let me see.
Give me a value here.
Let's see here on eBay. PSA 10 gem mint Deion Sanders, $149.99. And then a 9.5 is $6. So that guy might be a little bit then there's a much more reasonably listed one at $31 for a PSA 10. So it's got some value to it. Yeah, you might want to protect that one.
It's in excellent condition. I guess we have to worry about, is it centered?
Yes, that would be the next thing.
All right, well, we'll go through the process there. Maybe I'll just frame that one as a great moment in this show's history.
All right, welcome back, everybody. I'm Howard Bender, sitting beside Eric Balkman, and we're talking here at the FFPC main event Players Championships live in Las Vegas at Planet Hollywood. And oh baby, the jam-packed rooms, drafts going on everywhere. Balky, you just did a quick little tour here en route to getting yourself a little cup of coffee, a little cup of Joe. Keep yourself all wide awake. How are things looking inside?
They're basically every draft we have going on in there. Our main events that we offer. And I think we just sold out our last live main event. to see where Cooper Kupp goes in drafts. Is there a spot where you would be comfortable taking him now, Howard, with knowing that he is going to be out until week 5? This is another player. We talked about the Travis Kelce aspect, right? Guy getting older, guy who is not in his early to mid 20s anymore, and quite frankly, playing on a bad offense. Now, the great thing about the Rams is everything funnels through Cooper Kupp, right?
Exactly.
So once he's back, he's going to be a good play. The question is, how fast can he come back? How fast is he going to recover? And I think those are questions that these main event players are going to have to answer. What about Van Jefferson now? Because he should be the number 1 receiver for the Rams for the first 4 weeks. And this is a team that is kind of devoid of a lot of talent. I know Tyler Higbee's getting steamed up a little bit. Tight end premium with the FFPC 1.5 per catch for tight ends. I think Higbee's going to be very interesting for this first month of the season. And I know that Puka Nacua is getting some late round love.
Is Puka Nacua? Let me ask you a question. Who would you rather draft based on name alone, Tutu Atwell or Puka Nacua?
All right, I'll tell you. Okay.
My wife wants both of them on her roster now.
There have been a lot of people that have taken great relish in saying 2 players' names out here for the main event. Wide receiver Puka Nacua, and then the other one people always like saying, because you say the position and then you say the guy's name. Kicker Cameron Dicker. Everybody, let's say it gets chuckles around the table every single time. But yeah, the thing is with Nacua, I remember Derek Brown from Fantasy Pros, like loved him in the pre-draft process, even before the Rams selected him. Thought he was going to be a good player, and now and I'll look at Nakua's ADP. It's not high. It should go up a little bit. He was a 17th round pick, Howard, wide receiver 75. He should move up the board a little bit. But I think that the really compelling story here are the 3 players from the Rams, now that we know this about Kupp, is Kupp, Van Jefferson, and Tyler Higbee.
Yeah. And listen, I was very bullish on Higbee. I put together the DFS playbook over at Fantasy Alarm that released today. I do a watch list, and that comes out on Tuesdays, and then you can kind of carry through, and I take players out, I put players in, based on, what we're seeing from the news. But I had Tyler Higbee absolutely locked in there, strictly because Cooper Kupp, I knew he was going to be out. Now, putting him onto IR, it makes it official. But even so, like, Cooper Kupp comes back. Let's say Cooper Kupp comes back week 5, week 6, whatever it is, and he's in there. I'm still in on a guy like Tyler Higbee. I'm less involved with a Van Jefferson. I'm less concerned about a Puka Nacua. But to me, Matthew Stafford has two primary targets. Number 1 is Cooper Kupp. Number 2 is going to be Tyler Higbee.
Yeah. And I think the interesting thing with Higbee is he is now being drafted as a top 12 tight end. Was not being drafted as a top 12 tight end before, but now he's moved up into that 8-9 turn area right now. And this is a player that, again, we're not drafting on potential with Higbee. We are drafting on the fact that this guy has done it before. He's not a guy that we're hoping is going to be able to come through. He's come through already, and now he's going to have a golden opportunity to really come through. I don't necessarily think they run the offense through him, but he's going to get a ton of targets over this first 4 weeks of the season at a minimum, and maybe the rest of the season as well.
Well, I mean, it's gravitated more and more. It was really funny. I mean, I used to be known as the tight end whisperer, and some people still call me that, but when I was sitting there and I was like picking tight ends every single week, Higbee was always on my list. Why? Because you could set your watch by it. 1 catch, 8 yards. Touchdown, Tyler Higbee. And I used to call it the Higbee special. So anytime you'd get a tight end who would do something like that, it was the Higbee special. But yeah, now you're looking at a nice increase in targets for him, a bigger role in the offense. I mean, how many times have we seen him have those big games where it's all of a sudden it's a 2-touchdown game for Higbee, or all of a sudden the dude's getting like 8-9 targets in a game. So let's talk about the tight end position here, because I think that it's very important, especially when you are dealing with tight end premium. We don't need to discuss a guy like Travis Kelce. He's the 1-1 still. And, yes, there are some people waiting for the wheels to fall off that wagon. But, is there a tight end that you're looking at who could supplant him as that? Does TJ Hawkinson get the similar target share that we saw him get at the tail end of last season? Well, through the last 5 games of the Minnesota Vikings, I think Hawkinson had as many targets as Justin Jefferson.
And he was just learning the offense.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I think that, like to me, the compelling story in the offseason with Hawkinson was, is he going to usurp Mark Andrews as the tight end too this year? Now that never materialized. And in fact, when the Giants did what the Giants did and added all these slot guys and never really invested into big time free agent signing after Kenny Golladay, which I understand why they'd be a little skittish about that. Then Darren Waller got steamed. Like, oh my goodness, why are we letting Darren Waller slip? And then Waller actually moved past Hawkinson into tight end 3, and Hawkinson was tight end 4. Now with the news about Waller, he came down. It's a leg injury, right, that he's dealing with.
Yeah,
right now?
I think it's a hamstring.
Hamstring, yeah. So now, and obviously he's had some history with this. Now Hawkinson has moved back in front of Waller. For the same reason we talked about the Lions earlier in the first hour. For the same reason I was loading up on Lions, I'm loading up on the Vikings. Brian Flores is one man. Okay, he cannot. He's got a few fingers. He can plug the holes in the dam, right? But the water is going to cascade over that. He just does not have enough talent to work with. We'll see what happens with the Lions, but the Vikings defense I don't think is good. And as a result, I'm going to load up on Jordan Addison. I'm going to load up on Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson. And I really like the warts for Hawkinson to me are not that big. He goes in, again, tight end premium. He's going in the early 3rd round. I think that's a fine pick.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think that is a fine pick, especially in tight end premium situations. So, I find it very interesting because obviously I'm in on Kelsey, I'm in on Hawkinson, and I'm in on Mark Andrews. Mm-hmm. Now, Mark Andrews dealing with the quad injury right now. He is questionable for week 1, which, always bodes the question, do you want to go into the Isaiah Likely range? And Todd Monken, we've seen Todd Monken and his offense utilize 2 tight ends absolutely beautifully. So that's an interesting one for me. I think where we're worried about, and it's not so much, it's not a dead zone, but the question that I always have when I look at the tight end spot, Kyle Pitts, Dallas Goedert, all right, David Njoku, and George Kittle. And because I find that to be a very intriguing area. I tend to stay away. When I'm drafting, I tend to stay away because when I'm looking for a tight end, and maybe it's different because it's tight end premium, but when I'm looking, it's not different because it's tight end premium. What I'm looking for in a tight end is I'm looking for a guy who's going to either be a top 2, maybe 3 target in his offensive scheme. That's why Darren Waller is getting so much, helium here, is because there is no clear-cut number 1 wide receiver. Hawkinson's number 3 on the target share list for the Vikings. Kyle Pitts should be the second most targeted, player there. But, I look at like Pitts and I look at Goddard and I look at Njoku and I wonder, even as a 3rd target or 2nd or 3rd target, are these guys going to see enough in these offenses?
The other issue here is if you are concerned about that, and it sounds like you are, which is fine. Like you're talking about Pitts, Kittle, early 6th round. You're talking about Goddard, late 5th round. Is there value then? Well, I think there is value in just ignoring those guys and hitting up 2 of the following guys: Dalton Kincaid, Sam Laporta, Juwan Johnson, who has just been getting a lot of love. Dalton Schultz, I think, is in that conversation as well. I think Luke Musgrave is going to move up into that conversation, and obviously Higbee is going in that range too. Like if you have concerns there, and we've had people say this all the time, where you get an elite tight end, or you wait and then you load up on 2 or 3 of those guys that are going as the tight end 13, 14, 15 off the board. And yes, I know it's the main event. You got to pick your lineup. But when you have the access to the tight end whisperer at Fantasy Alarm, you can know which tight end to start week by week.
I did just that in my draft on Wednesday night, my FFPC draft on Wednesday night. I think it was somewhere around the 9th and 10th round. I was picking 12th, so I was on the wheel. And I was like, all right, here, it's time to start double tapping these tight ends.
Right.
And I double tapped Dalton Schultz and Sam Laporta. Yeah. I was like, boom, right there. These guys are heavily targeted in their offenses. Mm-hmm. They're going to be targeted inside the red zone as well. And that's where I'm living as far as my tight ends go. I'm not taking those mid-tier. I have no Freiermuth. I have no Goddard. I have no Pitts. And I have shares of Dalton Kincaid. I love that you brought up Dalton Kincaid. I thought Dalton Kincaid was great. Chigakonkwo was in that range for me as well until they signed DeAndre Hopkins. Once they signed DeAndre Hopkins, I pulled back. I had a lot of early shares of Chigakonkwo in drafts, and I had to pull back once they brought in DeAndre Hopkins. But
tight end 16 right now for Okonkwo too. I still think there's some value there.
Yeah,
regardless
absolutely,
of Hopkins.
absolutely. But I've flip-flopped him with Jawan Johnson.
Totally. 100%. Yeah, and I think I'm on board with that too. I think like I was just talking with Gilbert Brovar, longtime FFPC player, drafted in the main event last night. And he was asking me, like, do you think you need to have, is it imperative to have an elite tight end to be successful to win the $1 million? And I said, well, look, there's a zillion different ways to build your team because of the 2 flexes, right? So no, I don't think it's imperative. I think it gives you an advantage, but I also don't think you need to be, overstepping your bounds to try to get one of these tight ends on your team. I was facilitating a 5K buy-in, big payback with the FFPC last night. Tight ends went crazy high in that. I mean, it was insane. You're talking about, who got steamed up? Like, it was like Goddard or Pitts or somebody, Kittle, like the fourth round, because they kept flying off the board. Evan Engram was like a 5th round pick. So every draft is different. You kind of got to roll with it. And I always say, let the draft come to you. But getting back to Brovar, like the story I always remember in my head was, this is probably 8 or 9, maybe longer, might be 10 plus years ago. Don Metter, a former FFPC main event overall champion, started Dante Rosario as his tight end when he won the grand prize for the main event. Is it imperative to have an elite tight end? Clearly it's not. Clearly it is not. But I do think it gives you an advantage. And getting back to the Andrews discussion here, injury aside, what do you make of that Todd Monken offense? Because I think it's great for a guy like Zay Flowers, and I think it's part of the reason they gave Beckham all that guaranteed money, and obviously Bateman's still there as well. But like, how does it increase? Is Andrews going to have a better seat? Like, I don't know how much better he can get, even with the switch to this new Monken offense.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that, when you're looking at this switch, a lot of people were actually originally down on Mark Andrews because the air raid offense, and because they drafted Zay Flowers, they signed Odell Beckham. I think it opens up just as much for Andrews. Andrews has that rapport with Lamar Jackson, and that rapport is not going away. Quarterbacks get their security blankets. They like their guys that they do, because, like, here was the thing. This is what it was with Robert Tonyan in Green Bay. Mm-hmm. The year that he broke out. The reason he broke out was because he personally went to Aaron Rodgers and said, because everybody's like, Aaron Rodgers never throws to the tight end. He never throws to the tight end. And so nobody touched Tonyan. Tonyan went to Aaron Rodgers personally and said, what do I have to do to be your favorite target? And Rodgers said, you have to be in sync with me the entire time. If I'm rolling out to the left, you have to know exactly where I'm looking. And it's that kind of a rapport that developed between the two that you saw that breakout. Jackson has that with Mark Andrews. Mm-hmm. Mahomes has that with Travis Kelce. That you want to see that develop with your tight end and your and your quarterback. So, that's why it's always interesting to see Jawan Johnson. Is he doing the same thing with Derek Carr? Is Dalton Schultz doing that with CJ Stroud? Is that's what's happening there? So I don't think, I don't think anything changes with Mark Andrews in that sense. I do think that the offensive scheme helps. I think it definitely helps the situation for Isaiah Likely.
Oh, yeah, that's the other thing. Likely for a late round pick. Yeah. Again, a guy who's done it before, right?
Right.
If Andrews is out, like, that guy is a top 5 tight end,
But I think the key of what this offense is going to do, and I think it's very underrated aspect, which I think is really kind of funny, actually, is that when you've got 3 wide receivers and 2 tight ends, and you go with an empty backfield. Okay, you've got all of these guys running around the defensive backfield. The secondary is occupied. The safeties are watching what the tight ends are doing. The cornerbacks are covering the receivers. All right, and it spreads the offense not just downfield. It spreads the defense not just downfield, but it spreads it horizontally as well. And what happens when Lamar Jackson is rolling out to his left or to his right, and he's looking downfield, and all these guys are sitting there preoccupied with coverage? Lamar Jackson's going to take off.
Tuck it and run.
He is 100%. Running lanes are going to be wide open for him. I know that there's his week 1 rushing yards prop, 50.5 rushing yards. And I'm going to smash the over on that simply because I think that that's what's that we're going to see that. Yes. Is he going to be conditioned a lot more to look for those receivers downfield and be able to chuck the ball? 100%. But you also have to go. It's like you said earlier in the show here about Anthony Richardson. Tuck and run. That's what his instincts tell him to do. That's what he's going to do. And I think we're going to see that as well. So while I like Zay Flowers, while I've got a couple of shares of Odell Beckham, I don't, you know what? I honestly don't have any Rashad Bateman this year.
Very little. Do
you know why?
Why is that?
The workouts during the offseason, while Bateman was recovering still with his foot, Lamar Jackson was doing private workouts with Zay Flowers and with Odell Beckham. Mm-hmm. And Rashad Bateman was actually pissing and moaning about being left out of those. And
he was complaining about the GM. Like there was a lot of issues that he had with the Ravens this offseason. And then he had the situation where he was dealing with the injury and then he fell in drafts too. Obviously they were all bunched up before. Beckham, Bateman, and Flowers, right? All in that sort of like 9th round area. Sometimes back to back to back. Now, Flowers is like 7, 8, that area. Yep. And you can get Beckham in the 10th round. You get Bateman in the 10th round, right? So there's obviously been a clear delineation there. And I want to keep this Ravens conversation going. But before I forget, I meant to ask you this earlier. Dalton Schultz, Texans offense, right? Yeah. We talk about the tight ends there. So obviously they got John Mechie. Obviously they have Nico Collins is probably the number 1 receiver. There.
I'm sorry, I just dozed off when you said Nico Collins.
I'm sorry. CJ Stroud hasn't looked that great in the preseason. I don't have a whole lot of Dalton Schultz this year, but I wonder if that's a mistake because he could be. You never want to draft on opportunity; you want to draft on talent. But maybe he's one of these guys that you should be drafting on opportunity.
I am extremely overweight on Dalton Schultz.
Are you really?
I am extremely overweight on him because here's the thing. We've seen this before. Rookie quarterbacks love to lean on the tight end. We've seen this time and time again. And when you bring in a veteran tight end like Dalton Schultz, now, listen, I don't give a crap what about his yards after the catch or anything like that. I want to see the receptions. I want to see the targets come his way. I want to see the red zone looks. And I do firmly believe that is exactly what we're going to see. Bobby Slowick, the offensive coordinator, is used to doing that. He's used to working with the tight end at that point. And so for me, when you bring in a guy like Dalton Schultz in order to help stabilize and give a security blanket to CJ Stroud, that's what I'm here for. And the fact that I'm getting him still in the 10th round of drafts, whether it's tight end premium or
tight
not.
Tight end premium, 9-10 turn. I mean, to me, that's
what I did. Yeah. Him and Sam Laporta. And I, and that actually that pushed up Sam Laporta's ADP a little bit, for me double tapping that. But like those guys are sitting right there at that spot. And I think that's it's a fantastic spot to get him. I think you're getting great value with extreme upside as well.
Andrew Cooper, our buddy.
Yep.
I don't know if he's tight end whisperer junior, but he's right up there, right?
I passed the baton over
you
to
did?
him.
Okay,
I
that's
passed
official?
the baton. Yeah, that was definitely official, 100%. He does his tight end yin-yang rankings, which we support Andrew 100%. So we've made the tight end yin-yang rankings 100% free this year.
Oh, perfect.
Like we're keeping this for everybody. So you guys can find them over at Fantasy Alarm. The cheat sheet that we've been using for drafts, it's a part of the cheat sheet there as well. He does such a great job breaking down those tight ends that, he and I had massive discussions about this area. And that's another reason why you brought up Dalton Kincaid earlier. Let's talk Dalton Kincaid. Did the Bills bring in anybody else to help as far as receiving goes? No, they didn't. And they'll tether Dawson Knox to the line. They'll line up Dalton Kincaid in the slot. They'll use him as a receiver. It's really kind of funny. I know that we got all that, same, jargon when Kyle Pitts joined. And, he's going to line up in the slot and he's going to be a huge, heavy target, blah, 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 blah. I think it's real deal here with Dalton Kincaid. I think that he definitely stands a chance. I am not a Gabe Davis truther by any stretch of the imagination, So you're loading up targets to Stephon Diggs. Who's the number 2 receiving target on that team? I do firmly believe that it can be Dalton Kincaid.
I remember in the pre-NFL draft process, who was the number 1 tight end everybody was talking about? It was Michael Mayer, because he can do everything, right? He can block, he can catch, he's got a little bit of wiggle, not a ton, but he didn't need a ton because the rest of his game is so strong. And then we get into late March and April, and the guy everybody's talking about is Dalton Kincaid. Now, he had a back issue, if I remember correctly, didn't he? In the pre-draft process,
he might have. Yeah,
I remember people were kind of concerned about that a little bit. Anyway, then people are looking at like, okay, well, Mayer might be a better NFL tight end than a fantasy tight end, but it could be a better fantasy tight end than NFL tight end. It's Dalton Kincaid. And then I'll never forget this, on draft night, the Bills trade up into the first round to grab Kincaid. They've done nothing else in free agency, as you just pointed out. I'm like, there's your new number 2 receiver in Buffalo, and you get 1.5 points per catch for him in the FFPC main event. So now you're looking at Kincaid, a guy who I think he's been kind of a victim of the rise of Laporta and the rise of Musgrave a little bit, but you can still get him as the 12th running tight end off the board in the early 9th round. And to me, a guy, we always say rookie tight ends really struggle in the NFL. Is he a tight end? I don't. Yes, he is. But is he going to be used as a conventional tight end? No, he is not. And I think that's what makes him so attractive this rookie year, that the fact that you can wait on tight end and get a talent like that, again, league winning upside.
Well, that's kind of where we push it into. How about some tight end sleeper talk here then? Because you just said it. Is Dalton Kincaid a tight end, or is he just a big wide receiver? Look at and listen to any interview that Bill Belichick has done in the last month and a half. And you'll hear every time they bring up Mike Gesicki, he's a big wide receiver. Well, let me. He's a big wide receiver. He's a big wide receiver.
You got to tone it down a little bit. I think that's it's still way too much energy.
That's my 5-hour energy and Red Bull kicking in.
The Red Bull Belichick. I like it. Gesicki's another guy I'm surprised hasn't risen in drafts. Hunter Henry,
because he burned us so much in the past.
And that's the other thing too. Like, I think the best fantasy players are able to divorce the bad seasons they've had with players. Like, it's like being a corner in the NFL, short memory, right? The shorter the memory you have, the more successful you're going to be, right? So, and I think that Gesicki right now, I'm looking at the ADP, tight end 35, dude, tight end 35, the 19th round, he's free. You could easily grab him, and that's the other thing is that. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, and you cut him right away. Joe Del Zanero, one of my favorite FFPC players, he's kind of like my Yogi Berra of the FFPC, where he just says the most obvious things, and you don't think about it at all, but it's true. He always said, "Don't draft players on teams that don't score touchdowns." Right? Seems obvious, but how many times do we do it? How many times do we chase after these players on bad teams, and then they don't put it? And the other one he always says, and I subscribe to this theory, there is no such thing as a bad draft pick after the 10th round. Whoever you want to take 11th round or later, who cares? You can't rip on that pick. And now you're talking about Gesicki in the 19th round. Yeah, wheels up for him for sure.
You know who else we're putting wheels up if we're going to continue with some sleeper tight end talk here? Are you ready for this one? Logan Thomas.
Yes, especially week 1. Especially
Logan Thomas. And I know that a lot of when he was banged up and he was hurt and he was dealing with I think he had a leg injury as well. I think it was a hamstring. Everybody was moving in on Cole Turner, and Cole Turner was getting, a lot of great work here in the preseason and in camp. But Logan Thomas is 100%, ready to go here in week 1. And when people turn around, people are like, really, Logan Thomas, Cole Turner, what are you wasting your time for? You think about it. Who's Washington's offensive coordinator?
Eric Bieniemy.
Where did Eric Bieniemy come from?
Kansas City.
And who does Kansas City have as their tight end?
Travis Kelce.
And what do they do with Travis Kelce?
They throw to him a lot.
A lot. A lot.
Is there a similarity between how you viewed the Jaguars last year to how you view the Commanders offense this year?
Yeah, 100%.
Because all it takes is an OC change or an offense change, and it makes all the difference in the world.
Somebody in there with a system, and listen, I love Ron Rivera. I do. Why? Because Ron Rivera puts the offense into the hands of his coordinator. He doesn't sit there and try to screw around or mess around with it at all. He just says, go ahead, you run the offense. I'm much more of a defensive-minded guy. And that's what happened. So now that you've got Bieniemy in there and he's bringing that offensive scheme over, that's why, I don't want to slide away from that tight end talk because this tight end talk is super juicy. I love it so much. But look at Antonio Gibson and Brian Robinson. Like, Antonio Gibson, you draft this dude out of Memphis. He's a hybrid wide receiver running back, and you never throw to him for the first couple of seasons. Now, Eric Bieniemy comes from that Andy Reid scheme where they love their pass catching running backs. And I think that Antonio Gibson is somebody who is, being not ignored, but another one of those players who everybody's thinking about what he did in the past as opposed to what he's going to do. You can't, that's the thing. And we've said this over and over again. I'm not building my draft on what players did last year. I'm building my draft on what I expect these players to do this year. And when you're changing offensive coordinators and or head coaches, that's going to wake me up to pay attention to these players more.
I wonder if they never made the Bieniemy change, where these players, Robinson and Gibson specifically, would be going in drafts. And I can't imagine it'd be lower than running back 33 and running back 34, which is where they're going right now in the FFPC main event. The 8th round, end of the 8th round is where you can get these guys. We are believers in Bieniemy making changes to this offense that is going to be better for fantasy. So why are we letting these players drop? And I think the reason, especially Gibson, I think the reason is because wasn't 2 years ago, people were saying he's the next McCaffrey. Like people were talking about comparing. And then when that obviously didn't come close to happening, then everybody was super disappointed with Gibson. And I think that has cascaded over the last couple of years, that people are just, if they need a running back, and they're all gone, they're like, okay, I guess I'll take Gibson. Nobody's excited about making that pick. And they should be more excited about making that pick this year, and they're not. And I think that's a value in drafts right now. Because, like I said, if Bieniemy wasn't there, I don't think Gibson would be going lower than he is, which means he's a value right now.
Right. I've even, I argued with Jim Bowden about this on the Fantasy Alarm Show because he was all in on Brian Robinson. And I was saying you have to pay attention a little bit more to Antonio Gibson for that fact. And, when we started watching a little closer in camp, how things were going and how things were being used. Now, this week 1, I'm all in on Brian Robinson over Antonio Gibson, but that's because of the matchup. Mm-hmm. That's because Arizona stinks. That's because the Arizona defense is going to get slapped around by the Washington Commanders, believe it or not. There is some rain in the forecast and, whatever. But, in that second half, what are they going to do? I think they're going to load up Brian Robinson on carries and just let him chew the clock up. Like that's what Riverboat Ron loves to do. Yeah, he likes to take chances early on in the games, but if he's got a lead, Riverboat Ron is like, run the ball.
And it'd be a great confidence builder for Sam Howell in his first start too, to have them go out there, really dominate the game, get him comfortable back there where he's not put in a position like where he's playing at Philly week 1, where it's like he has all this pressure to make plays. That's not going to happen. At least it shouldn't happen against Arizona. And then, obviously on third downs, he'll be asked to make a few plays here and there, but the pressure will be off him. It'll be a great way for him to enter the NFL. Speaking of the Arizona Cardinals, any fantasy value for you? How are your Cardinals shares this year? Are you invested into Connor or Brown or McBride or anybody?
I took Clayton Tune as a 4th quarterback
nice.
in a very deep super flex league. No, you know what? I mean, James Conner. I've got a couple of shares of James Conner only because I wanted to build up some running back depth. And he is the only running back there. I mean, that's, Keontae Ingram or whatever his name is.
It's an injury away type guy. Like, that's the only reason you draft him.
Right. So Connor is a guy who I think that if they really want, if Jonathan Gannon wants to just kind of, toe the line a little bit, he wants to establish a ground game, that's fine. But when you're talking about receivers, like I'm not even in on Trey McBride. Everybody's still, talking about Trey McBride in the wake of, Zach Ertz and is he healthy and how's his knee and things like that. I have no interest in it. I have no interest in Marquise Hollywood Brown, and to be perfectly honest, even if Kyler Murray comes back, which, supposedly he's going to.
That made captain. for the team this year. So I don't know.
Yay!
Well, I'm just saying, like if he's not playing this year and they want to move on from him, I don't think that they would make him a captain. You know what I mean?
Yes, that definitely, which is a disappointing thing right there, because I mean, I would just love to see them, tank it for Caleb Williams.
If Caleb Williams comes out, according to his dad, he may not.
Oh, right. Are we going to have that? Are we going to see that again this year? Are we going to see what was it? It was Eli Manning who Archie didn't want Eli playing for the San Diego Chargers. And so he basically forced that trade so that he landed with the Giants. What did the Chargers do? They ended up getting Phillip Rivers at that point.
And it worked out for both teams. The thing with Arizona is again, don't draft players on teams that don't score touchdowns, right? So I think, McBride, while he's a second-year tight end, you'd like to think he makes a leap this year. It's tough to make a leap in that offense, whether it's Murray or Toon or whoever throwing the football to him there. It's not going to be great.
Dobbs
had
the playbook now for what, 3 weeks?
Well, okay, but I will say this about Dobbs: he's the rocket scientist, right? Might be the smartest guy in the NFL. If there's anybody who's going to assimilate a playbook, that fast, it's probably him. Arizona this year too. It's just it's unfortunate, for fantasy and for those guys. I can't imagine being a player on that team and having to, gut it out for 18 weeks on a team that really is playing for 2024. Caleb Williams thing will be interesting, because if he does get, drafted by the Cardinals there, all of a sudden wheels up for Marquise Brown, Rondale Moore, Michael Wilson, McBride, all those guys he's going to make better. But that's a conversation for next year for sure.
Yeah, definitely for next year, because I'm not doing it this year at all. Not one bit. Let's talk about teams that have the rookie quarterbacks coming in this year. All right, we've got Bryce Young in Carolina. CJ Stroud is manning the way in Houston. Where else am I looking?
Well, you're looking at Anthony Richardson. Yeah.
So where are you as far as players on that team, whether it's running backs or wide receivers or tight ends? I'm in on Dalton Schultz in Houston. All right. I'm in on Miles Sanders in Carolina. As far as tight end, as far as Indianapolis goes, I've seen Michael Pittman drop enough in drafts that I've actually scooped him up as a potential guy. I think I got him one draft in the 10th round. Nobody was touching him. How fearful are you of the peripheral players on the roster when you've got that rookie QB in there?
Yeah, so Carolina, let's start with Carolina with Bryce Young. I think Adam Thielen is sort of like a fringy, wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 at best. And that's when he's healthy. I think the interesting player there is Jonathan Mingo, a guy I scooped up in a lot of dynasty rookie drafts, thinking that he looks the part of being a future number 1. Now, if you break down the tape and you go a little bit further in the analytics, doesn't really match up as much. So we'll see what happens with Mingo there. But I think he could be an interesting best ball guy. It's tough for me to count on him in a managed league. Thielen is a little bit different. I think Thielen is more of a guy that, if I'm dealing with injuries or bye weeks, I could plug him in as a flex and feel all right about it. I don't know how. I have Hayden Hurst as a backup tight end.
What do you mean you don't know how?
I don't know how that happened. I never targeted him, and somehow he's on all these teams, which is weird.
Because it's a last round pick.
Yeah, I guess that's probably what it was. He was super cheap, and it was a name I recognized. So I ended up drafting him. But I think he's all right. Tight end premium leagues, he's still being drafted out here, obviously, as well as a secondary tight end. And then Miles Sanders is interesting because I feel like in that backfield, Hubbard was given the opportunity last year after the McCaffrey trade, and didn't really do anything with it, right? And who's the other guy, Blackshear, that I'm thinking of? Mm-hmm. He's not a needle mover. And if that's the case, if they don't have the chops at running back behind Miles Sanders, well, you don't have to like Miles Sanders in order to draft him in the running back dead zone again, right? Talking about the 6th round. He's going to get all he can handle there, unlike what he had in Philly, where they're always utilizing multiple running backs. The opportunity is going to be a lot better this year. Maybe the efficiency won't be. But yeah, I mean, volume running backs, I'm on board with Sanders.
Yeah, see, I'm 100% on board with Sanders. And, it was kind of funny because last year, Miles Sanders was plummeting in drafts. Why? Because he didn't score a touchdown the year before. No touchdowns at all for him.
He told people not to draft him
in
last
2021, right? It was like no touchdowns for Miles Sanders. I was 100% in on him last year. 1,200 yards,
and a ton of
touchdowns there. But then he comes to Carolina, which I'm totally fine with because Deuce Staley is over there. Frank Reich is now the head coach for Carolina, and I think Andrew Cooper, to name another Miles Sanders truther, should we say, was showing everybody the video of Deuce Staley sitting there in the room with Miles Sanders, referring to the fact of, do you remember when we were in Philadelphia together and you were catching like 50 passes? That's what I want to see from you this year. So when you start hearing stuff like that, and yeah, like you said, Raheem Blackshear, Chuba Hubbard has not, he's not lived up to the hype that he had in college. And I'm in on that. So, all right. So Carolina, we like the we like the running back. We're lukewarm on the tight end. We're
at best
slightly lukewarm on Jonathan Mingo and Adam Thielen.
Yeah, I would say that's probably accurate. The other thing too, Bryce Young, like we talk about the Anthony Richardson aspect of him tucking and running. I don't really see that with Bryce Young.
No, he's not that guy.
And the fact that Miles Sanders can not only catch the ball, he's done it before. The fact that Deuce Staley is already talking him up as a pass catcher, and Bryce Young having the opportunity to dump it off to him when he gets under pressure. These are all things that we like as fantasy players. That's how I'm on the.
Oh yeah, that was check it down, baby. Keep checking it down. All right, let's move over to Indianapolis because yes, the plummeting of good old Michael Pittman. We've seen that. I have a number of shares because it was a last round pick of Alec Pierce. Because with no Paris Campbell there, Alec Pierce definitely slides in as the number 2. Jelani Woods is hurt. Kyle Granson at tight end. Free pick. Last round, free pick. Does that interest you at all?
Not terribly. And I think and we have not seen Granson or Woods get selected out here. It just hasn't happened. And I think part of obviously the injury for Woods, but I think another part of the reason is people view the high stakes players view this Colts offense as such a low volume passing offense. It's tough to find. Though that's one of the rare teams that when you look at those late round picks, it's one of the rare players that like you can't see a path to upside, right? You talked about Alec Pierce. I'm seeing him go 16th, 17th, 18th round out here. Josh Downs here and there, but his value is moving the chains and catching all these balls. Is that really the way the Colts win this year? I don't necessarily know if that's the case.
The Colts are going to win this year?
Well, I mean, the plan to win this year. Yeah, I should say. Yeah. And plus, I think he's kind of a duplication of skills a little bit with Michael Pittman. Like, they're not necessarily complementary players. Pittman is a guy that has, I want to say like early 4th round a couple of months ago. And then Richardson got named the starter, and then the slide for Pittman started. Now he's still, going at the end of the 7th round. I mean, there's some value there, and I'm seeing some Sharks, some very successful players hopping aboard him in the mid 7th to late 7th. Even if it's a low volume passing offense, the NFL is a passing league, and there is going to be value. And Pittman's done it before. Again, once you've demonstrated a skill, you own it. I think that's a Ron Chandler thing. I could be wrong on that, but Michael Pittman has done it before. So you're not only betting on his potential of what he's going to do with Richardson, but you're also betting on his past a little bit because he has shown us that he can be a very capable receiver. I don't have a lot of them, but dude, at the end of the 7th, early 8th. If I need a receiver, yeah, for sure.
The number 1 target in that passing offense, in that passing attack for that team. And, listen, even if it is a low volume passing offense, and I think that's something that we definitely need to, kind of discuss as well when you're talking about wide receivers who are on these low volume passing offenses. And, immediately, your attention turns to Tennessee. Right. And you think about that. You've got DeAndre Hopkins and Treylon Burks as the 1 and 2 in that offense. Hopkins, I see him going, 3rd round, early 4th is probably the latest I've seen him go. Treylon Burks, he dropped because of the injury, but then all of a sudden he's jumped back up and he's gotten some steam. You have to look at it and say, listen, if this guy is still, maybe he's not going to see 14, 15 targets in a game, But if this guy's going to average 8 or 9 targets as the wide receiver 1 on a team, you still have to pay attention to that.
Yeah, I think the other thing that there are so many high stakes players that I was talking to after the NFL draft, even right before the NFL draft, that were like, okay, this is going to be Burks' year. Because you remember, he kind of broke out a little bit towards the end of last year. Like, you could see like it's starting to click for him a little bit. And I know his ADP got moved way up as a result. Like, we launched drafts at the FFPC in like January, and you saw him, being drafted significantly higher than where he is now. Injury and the Hopkins thing, it's a huge dent in it. And then the thing that I think of when I see the Hopkins signing to Tennessee, and I'm like, what is this? Does this say anything about what the Titans think of Treylon Burks, which is something we should keep in mind going forward? Because if they invested, what was Burks last year? Was he a first round pick?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, he was a first round.
Late first.
Late first, yeah. So they invest that first round draft capital in him last year, and now you're giving DeAndre Hopkins a big contract. Like, to me, that's counterintuitive for your player evaluation.
Is it counterintuitive, or are you maybe thinking about changing things up a little
philosophy
bit?
Change? Yeah,
that could be. I mean, let's Pete Carroll. I make jokes all the time about Arthur Smith, that I wish I loved anything as much as Arthur Smith loves to run the football.
Right. Yeah.
I used to say that about Pete Carroll. Well, running the football and chomping gum, but
not necessarily in that order.
What did Pete Carroll do? Pete Carroll went and he got the passing game coordinator for the Rams in Shane Waldron. And what did we see last year? We saw Geno Smith throw the 6th most pass attempts in the NFL. Geno Smith, run first offense, 6th most passing attempts. So it is a pass happy NFL. And you are starting to see a lot of these teams who were, plotting and, run first. And all of a sudden you're changing your tune. Is Tennessee ready to make that move? Because let's face facts, their offensive line has been getting weaker and weaker every single year. And Derrick Henry last year was the first time that we saw him get hurt, miss time. So now all of a sudden, are you thinking that, well, maybe we just tune in, our good friend Ryan Tannehill or Will Levis, the heir apparent, and we have these guys, 3-step drop, release, make it nice and quick, because you don't have the offensive line protection that you usually do, and you have to be able to move the chains. So sitting there and running the football 30 times a game might not be the way to go. I think there are teams that are making that shift. You'll always have a guy like Arthur Smith doing it, but that's because he built up his offensive line in the offseason, and he's got a young stud in Bijan Robinson. So I'm kind of wondering if maybe Tennessee is kind of shifting gears that way.
Yeah, obviously the Derrick Henry's best football is behind him at this point. And the transition, how many freaks do we see like Derrick Henry coming to the NFL? Very few. It's like Packers quarterbacks, right? Are you going to really be able to hit on somebody again like Derrick Henry? Probably not. And it's going to be much easier, especially the way that, rightly or wrongly, how the NFL is treating running backs. It's going to be one of those things where they're replaceable. And it's easier to put in a guy like Tyjae Spears or, Hassan Haskins if he ever comes back. It's going to be easier to put those guys in because they're more plentiful than players on the perimeter like Hopkins, like Treylon Burks. And now you get Chiga Okonkwo too, coming into Tennessee and really make a difference in both the running and passing game. So I think that you need to find a way, if you're Tennessee, to improve that offensive line in order to be competent. Until then, you have a potential breakout receiver in Burks. You have a very reliable guy in Hopkins, and you have a guy who, say what you will about Ryan Tannehill, but he can make, he can get it done at a minimum. Like he's a competent quarterback. And when you have Hopkins and Burks, quite frankly, you don't need much more than competence in order to make those guys fantasy relevant.
So, folks, we're broadcasting here live from the FFPC Players Championships in Las Vegas. We are at Planet Hollywood. If you're in the neighborhood, stop on in and come say hi. In the meantime, we've also got some questions here in chat. Now, I figure we can jump into some of these questions here, get some thoughts on what's going on, because we are waiting. Some of these drafts are going to be wrapping up soon, and we're going to be bringing on guests to talk about their teams and their drafts. So let's see. What's that first one there that I'm looking at? Is that Najee Harris or Joe Mixon? That's kind of an interesting debate right there. Najee, A lot of people are sour on him. I don't really understand why. I like Pittsburgh's offensive line. I thought drafting Broderick Jones as a Jets fan, it hurt me beyond belief because I had him targeted for the Jets in the draft. Mike Tomlin's already come out and said that Najee is his guy. Now you've got a guy like Joe Mixon who legal troubles are behind him right now. Not guilty on all these charges and counts and all the stuff that's going on there. Here's a guy who took a pay cut for multiple seasons in order to stay with the Cincinnati Bengals because he believes in what's going on right now. Their ADP, I don't know what it is here at the FFPC, how similar they are, because Joe Mixon has started to climb back up. But who do you like more, Najee Harris or Joe Mixon?
All right, so I have never been a Najee Harris guy at all. I think that, and we were talking about this, Matt Shelf and I were talking about this the other day. Najee Harris entered the NFL in the NFL draft in the year where it was not a talent-rich year for running backs. And as a result, Harris was the de facto 101 in dynasty rookie drafts, and he had a pretty successful season. Maybe not an efficient one, but he had got so much volume that people loved it. Like, okay, Harris is going to be great. The efficiency has gone down significantly. And the Steelers, regardless of what Tomlin says, they've used Jaylen Warren more. Jaylen Warren has been more of a part of that offense at this point. And I think the high-stakes players have soured a little bit on, volume's good, efficiency's, important too. And I think that the fact that Harris has not really set the world on fire, and the Steelers don't really have, I wouldn't call him an elite offense, has soured people a little bit on it. Now, right now, Najee Harris in the FFPC main event over the last 24 hours, and again, about 36 plus drafts that we've had going off, Najee Harris comes in with an ADP of, just had it, running back 13, 404 is where he's going. So he's fallen to the 4th round. Joe Mixon, on the other hand, is a player who is in an elite offense, who is not having any threats behind him in the backfield. Chase Brown, Chris Evans, Travion Williams, none of those guys are a threat to become part of the regular offensive attack for the Bengals. And that's, Warren is in Pittsburgh. Mixon, on the other hand, and again, on an elite offense, running back 9 at the 308. So roughly about 2/3 of a round separating these two. The players out here like Mixon better. Howard, even if Harris was going ahead of Mixon, I'd still rather have Mixon this year.
I'll agree with that statement, actually.
There you go.
I will 100% agree with that statement. Joe Mixon for me as well. Parker, thank you so much for that question. Let me move on over here. Here's a question. This is funny. Here's a quarterback question for you. I've gotten this question at least a dozen times. I kid you not. I'm not even exaggerating. And I'll shout it out to a good friend of mine who works inside the Milwaukee Brewers organization, who has asked me this question twice, and I've given him my answer on both. I'll get yours here. Daniel Jones or Anthony Richardson, who are you starting week 1? Now, all right, listen, I will preface it by saying Daniel Jones does not have a great history against the Dallas Cowboys. Last 5 games have not looked very good. However, we do have to talk about the fact that this is a new this is now his 2nd year in Brian Daboll's offense. And he does have a new weapon in Darren Waller versus Anthony Richardson, who has, they both have rushing upside. And I don't want people to think about that. 700 plus yards and 7 touchdowns on the ground for Daniel Jones. People seem to be forgetting about that. But Anthony Richardson, like you said, it's instinct for him to tuck and run. So who do you like more? We can talk about week 1, and then let's talk about future of the rest of the season, because apparently that's a quarterback tandem that a lot of people have drafted this year.
Absolutely. I've seen a lot of Jones-Richardson pairings. I think, over the course of the season, I would rather have Richardson because of the upside and getting a guy like Daniel Jones, Jared Goff, Cousins, Smith to go with him is fine. And I think that's what you should be doing. If you're investing in Richardson, don't wait to take Brock Purdy or Jordan Love or anybody like that late. Get one of those top 15 other quarterbacks to go with them, like Daniel Jones. I don't like either one of these players' matchups week 1. They're both at home, which is good. But that Dallas defense is good. And I'll tell you, we talk about overweight players. Man, I drafted the Jaguars defense in a ton of leagues because of this week 1 matchup, right? Because if I'm streaming defenses, which I love to do, I thought this will be great. Jaguars taking on Anthony Richardson in his first ever start. So I guess for me, it's week 1. You're not chasing anything right now. You have a whole season in front of you. I don't think you necessarily need to take the chance on the upside with Richardson. I think you could, and I think it'd be fun to do it. Like we're playing for fun, right? Like fantasy football should be fun. It's more fun to watch Anthony Richardson in his first ever start in the NFL, and he's in your starting lineup. That's fun. Daniel Jones, I think, is probably the way I would go. Has more of a command of the offense. I think he's a more well-rounded player than Richardson. I think you're right. People kind of, I don't remember, didn't Daniel Jones have that big run? Was it last year or the year before? And he tripped.
And he tripped. Yeah, he tripped over like the 10-yard
exactly. And I think that's in our minds, like, oh, Jones can't run. Look at it. But he can run, and he puts up a lot of yardage. So I think because he's the more well-rounded player, he's the veteran. I understand the upside of the rookie, but week 1, again, I'm not chasing anything. I'm going to try to start off with a good week, and I think it's Daniel Jones here.
All right. Well, then
that's also coming from a guy again who's loaded up on the Jaguars defense. So take that for what you will.
All right, no problem. No problem there. Listen, I said Daniel Jones as well. I did. I 100% said Daniel Jones, and I cited that, very same thing is that, you're taking the more proven player, and it's a solid pick. We'll see what happens with him against Dallas again. And yes, I get it. Dallas's defense is great, but what's the best way to neutralize an incredible pass rush like the Dallas Cowboys have? Tuck and run.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. Daniel Jones will do that. All right. Wide receiver question here. This one's coming from George Play 01. And here you go. This is going to put your loyalties to the test. Week 1 start sit decision. Deontay Johnson or Jaden Reed.
Okay. So here's the thing. I think that I have more Reed shares this year than I do Deontay Johnson. And I think it was a mistake I didn't draft Johnson a lot more. I have, I've facilitated a lot of 3K, 5K, 10K. Right after we get off the broadcast today, I'm facilitating another 10K. And Deontay Johnson has been moving up boards. And the thing that to me that makes that so interesting is there's not any news out of Pittsburgh that would cause that to happen. I think it's a case of these high stakes players understanding that if they want Johnson on their team, they're going to have to take him a half round or a round earlier than they have been in order to get him. So to me, that this people smarter than I and putting up a ton of cash to do it are drafting Johnson much earlier. I think that you have to understand that he is still going, as much as we love George Pickens and what he can do in the playmaking, Johnson is a focal point of that offense. He's going to get a ton of targets. Maybe not a lot of touchdowns, but a ton of targets, which is going to turn into a lot of catches.
Oh, were you just pulling the Deontay Johnson didn't score a single touchdown last year?
Well, I'm pointing that out. It's not sticky. Okay. Like touchdowns are not a sticky stat. It could happen again. It could not. We don't know. It's like flipping a coin sometimes. Jaden Reed is interesting this week because we know Watson is going to miss, right? And Reed is obviously going to be probably involved in the Packers offense more than Green Bay probably wanted him to be for his first career NFL game. Deontay Johnson is the number 1 target for the Pittsburgh offense, which I think is better at this point than the Green Bay offense. Jaden Reed is the number 3, maybe, for the Packers offense, maybe the number 2, probably the number 3, an offense that's not as good as Pittsburgh's. To me, if you're trying to decide between Johnson and Reed, there is a such thing as think long, think wrong. Just don't overthink it. Start Deontay Johnson. He has the draft capital on your team. Jaden Reed does not. The matchup to me is that shouldn't dictate your decision at all. I'd go with Johnson.
All right, Deontay Johnson it is. All right, here's from Justin Blanco, who is new to fantasy football, so he's trying to sort some stuff out. If George Kittle is deemed out for week 1, who should I drop to replace him? On his bench, Devin A-Chain. I know you're not going to say that name. Rashee Rice, Juju Smith-Schuster, or Quentin Johnston.
Okay. I think, and I meant to ask you Palmer versus Johnston before. We'll get into it a little bit now. The report from the Athletic Chargers beat writer, I can't remember his name, Daniel Popper, I want to say.
Okay.
Said that Palmer is running ahead of Johnston right now at the start of the season.
Correct.
Johnston has been struggling with drops, as some rookies do, and he's still getting acclimated. Palmer's a guy who's done it before, right? I think if you're in a league where you have to drop one of those players, and the other thing I want to look at, is Kittle the late game? No, so he plays at 1 p.m. on Sunday. So you'll know before then. If you are in a league where you have to drop one of those players in order to get a backup tight end, to me, it doesn't strike me as a very deep league. And if that's the case, you really can't. I'm not going to say A-Chain, like you said. What we saw with Rashee Rice, he looked like maybe the most capable receiver for Kansas City out there Thursday. Can't really drop him. But Quentin Johnston is a guy that hasn't shown us much right now. Palmer's running ahead of him. I'm sure Johnston at some point turns it on this season, but pick him up then. You can't afford a zero in your lineup. Drop him, pick up the tight end, and then if you really like Johnston, get him back later on. I don't think in a league like that, and I'm guessing here, I don't think you need to be keeping Johnston on your team at this point.
I completely agree. I see. It's nice when we're like in lockstep like this.
This is great radio.
Very harmonious. Oh, I agree. Bulky, you idiot. All right. Last question here before we try to rope in some of these FFPC players and get some of their thoughts on their drafts. Is Odell Beckham Jr. an overpay for Cooper Kupp?
In a trade? You'd be okay.
In like a trade. I know you're not used to trading here because there's no trading allowed here, but
I got to wrap my head around it. Well, because I play a lot of dynasty leagues where there's trading, but that's a different aspect than redraft trading. Is he an overpay? If you are going to pitch me on a Beckham versus Kupp trade, which one would I rather have for redraft? Even with the IR thing, I'd rather have the Kupp end of that deal, right? Beckham to me has the potential of never being fantasy relevant all season long. He could be, but there's also the real possibility that it's all about Andrews, Flowers, Bateman, Dobbins in that offense, and Beckham is just the number 3 or number 4 guy. Kupp, yeah, you're going to miss the first month, but think about deploying him late in the season, and all you have to do is give up Beckham for him. To me, it's a slam dunk. You got to take the Cooper Kupp side of that deal. So Beckham's not an overpay. He's just not enough.
He's not enough. I'm sitting there thinking if I'm trading Cooper Kupp, I'm thinking, well, you got to give me a little bit more than just Odell Beckham.
Totally.
I definitely don't want to do that. All right. Well, I see a lot of movement going on, which means that some drafts are ending here live in Las Vegas at Planet Hollywood. It is the FFPC Players Championships, the main event. Drafts are happening left and right. We're going to try and pull in some guests here for our broadcast, so stick around. He's Eric Balkman. I'm Howard Bender. And again, we're live here in Las Vegas. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Like Devon Levi started off in the friend zone and now like he could possibly be wife material. So it is exceptionally hard to trust a rookie goalie in the NHL. The kid is what? He's 21. Like, okay. And he is going to the Buffalo Sabres. But we've all agreed that the Buffalo Sabres are at least a somewhat better hockey team on paper. Again, it's hard to trust a rookie goalies. We've seen future Hall of Fame goalies like, Fleury in his first year struggle, right? Carey Price in his first year struggle. It is tough for goalies to come in and have success. That being said, nobody outside of maybe a Buffalo sports fan can tell me who the 2 goalies on their roster are, because I didn't know until this morning, until I was reminded that it was Eric Comrie and Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. And I was like, okay, well, he has the crease to himself. So all he can do is lose it. That's all he can do. Buffalo is going to be a fun team to watch, which means maybe Devon Levi ends up in what I call the Martin Jones syndrome, which is a goals against average is pretty up there. Save percentage is not very good, but he's going to finish with 35 wins because he's just going to play a lot. And it's going to be that back and forth hockey. The Atlantic Division is not very good, right? There are some teams that are going to regress. So there's opportunities here for Buffalo to do well. And I think his over-under on wins is set at 24.5. So again, there's a lot of things that I may not trust about him. But as a 13th goalie off the board, and I think that is a reach at 13. I think a lot of people have him farther back than that. So he may be 13 on NHL.com's list, but you may end up and show up in your Yahoo or your ESPN draft and they haven't ranked probably outside of the top 20. So I would have no issue as a second goalie going with Levi, because like, who's taking his spot? Nobody. And volume at one point, if you're in a league that doesn't penalize you for losses, if you're in a league that rewards saves and save bonuses like, for daily, DraftKings does, he has all that working for him. So if it doesn't work out, all right, fine. Then you can go and pick up whoever is there. But it is his net to lose. I understand the risk. I will definitely take, because that's how you win championships, right? You got to take risks to win them. If you're safe, you're going to finish, eliminated in the first round and you had a good time. Or you can try to win the championship on draft day.
All right, welcome back, everybody. I'm Howard Bender, sitting beside Eric Balkman, and we are live in Las Vegas at Planet Hollywood for the FFPC Players Championships main event. $1 million at stake for just playing some fantasy football. What could be better than that? Balky, you're giving away $1 million to somebody to play some fantasy football, and you know what? We could have the $1 million winner with us right now. We've got FFPC veteran Jared Eisenlord joining us here on the show. Jared, thank you so much for joining us. Yes, let's get some clapping
Absolutely.
in here.
Welcome,
get some applause. Get some applause. Jared, thank you so much for joining us, man. Appreciate that. You just wrapped up your draft, huh?
What? So this was the main event that you just drafted, right? Okay. Yep. Main event. And what slot were you picking from?
I was on
12. Okay. The wheel, as it were.
I love it.
Something I love it today. Strategy going in when you found out you had the 12. What was it?
You got to change because you've got to look at 10, 12 picks, and you're going to have to reach. If there's a guy you like that is not going to make it back, you got to reach. You got to be kind of a little bit comfortable being uncomfortable with some of those guys.
Who did you reach on today in your draft?
I would say Fields.
Where'd you get him?
I got him at 601.
601, okay, yeah.
Higbee. I like Higbee with the target share he's going to have. I took him at the beginning of the 8th. I think that's probably a round or two earlier than what I've seen, at least. Those were the big ones. And you just know some of them aren't going to come back. Like I'd love to have Jahmyr Gibbs. He looks so good on Thursday.
Well, yeah, but you're a Lions fan, right?
Well, that's true. That is true. But I do like Jahmyr Gibbs. I'm usually pretty good at separating the two, but he just looked explosive and fast, and they're going to ramp up his usage. But you just can't take him that early.
Jared, do me a favor here, because for the kids at home, because if they're watching here on the YouTube pages, they don't see your draft board. So just give us a quick rundown here of where you started from the 12 spot and who you drafted.
Yeah, first turn, CeeDee Lamb and Saquon Barkley.
That's exactly what I did on mine.
Oh, that's good.
On Wednesday night.
I like 100%. That. All right, good. Then maybe I'm thinking the right way here.
Or you're both wrong.
Or we're both wrong. That's also true. I trust Howard. And then coming back, I just didn't see the running back value there. So I doubled up at wide receiver and went Metcalf, DJ Moore.
Okay.
Which is what led me to reach a little bit on Fields the next turn. So I took Fields, and then I got David Montgomery. He's got 13 or so points already in the bank from the look ahead from Thursday night's game. And then because I waited on tight end, I had to kind of be aggressive. And at 7 and 8,
back-to-back tight ends.
I went back-to-back with Evan Ingram and Higbee.
See, I did something similar, but I did it a couple of rounds later. I did it 9-10, where I went Dalton Schultz and Sam Laporta. So I see exactly what you're doing there, and I love that double tap of the tight end position. I really do.
Yep. If you wait, you've got to be a bit more aggressive later on. 9-10, Samaje Perine I think he's going to have some good usage. And then I took the value at Sky Moore. He fell quite a bit after
plummeting.
Thursday.
He is absolutely plummeting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that much of a surprise? How many little memes and gifs do we have to watch on the internet of like small children in adult football helmets missing passes?
Yeah. I mean, 2 weeks ago, I probably would have had him a few rounds ahead of that. Right. So I'll take him at 10. Jacoby Myers, again, a target share situation there where I think he's at the number 2 in Vegas. And then I just started finding guys that a mixture of depth. So Jerick McKinnon, Irv Smith.
Goff on your team too. My goodness.
So
Montgomery and Goff.
And
you wish you had Gibbs.
Well,
don't tell me.
No, not in this one.
Here's the one. This coming from the ultimate Packers homer. You are the ultimate Packers homer.
Right. Yeah.
Come on.
Well, here's the deal. I've got Justin Fields, and the downside of Justin Fields is that week 13, that week 13 bye. And so it's the first round of the playoffs. And so you've got to find a quarterback with a good matchup in week 13. So that
is, by the way, I mean, like, I don't think it's a bad pick. I actually have him on several teams because I think that he's gonna do numbers. Like, look what he did in Kansas City last night, or on Thursday night, and he's gonna have, especially when Jameson Williams comes back. Yeah, for sure.
And Williams will be back then, and it's going to be a dome game that week. So I just needed to have a quarterback with a decent floor. Depth at Irv Smith. I like Irv Smith in Cincinnati.
You know what I like about that pick too is and Howard, I've said this, but I think I've said this on your show. Like, if you go heavy on a position, or if you hit a position hard, don't ignore it for the rest of the draft. And I think, like Jared, in the FFPC main event, I feel like if you wait on tight end, you really should have 3. And to get Engram and to get Higbee, right? I don't think that's enough. You get Irv Smith there late. Now, as George Costanza would say, now you got a team. So now you look at those 3 tight ends there. I think you can definitely play matchups with those guys too.
I'm kind of curious as to who the other tight ends were on the board there. I'm gonna be the jerk here of the if we're walking into the jerk store with another George Costanza reference, Irv Smith to me's got the mobility of a refrigerator, and when you're sitting there and you've got Higgins and Boyd and Jamar Chase running around out there. Big Irv Smith, who never developed in Minnesota. So I'm just kind of curious, Jared. I mean, listen, so far I'm digging on your team a lot, but if I'm going to have to poke holes somewhere, who else was out there available to you at the tight end spot?
The tight ends after Irv would have been Trey McBride, Hunter Henry, Isaiah Likely, Michael Mayer.
Likely, maybe.
Yeah, Likely was probably the guy.
But I don't even know that. Like, I can't make a strong. I'm fine with Irv Smith over Likely. Yeah. I could see it either way. The draft as a whole. Well, actually, take us through the rest of your team. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So after that, I kind of went with a handcuff wide receiver because I got CeeDee Lamb. I took Gallup.
Okay.
And just a little protection there.
Sure.
And Gallup could, in the slot could produce. Rondale Moore, I thought, was a value in 17. I was the first one to jump on a kicker, but again, it's at the turn, and I wanted Tucker. He's got a week 13 bye, which means I get every regular season game with a kicker.
That's a good point.
So I grabbed on him in the first to the 16th, and then I doubled up on defenses on 18, 19 with the Jets and the Dolphins.
There you go. I
Jets
love the
defense,
Jets
baby.
I love that.
So I just got those back to back, and then finished with just a dart throw with Breida because I've got Barkley.
Did you, not necessarily with your team, did anything stand out to you in that draft where you're like, oh my goodness, I can't believe this position's getting pushed up. I can't believe this position is falling. What was that guy thinking, taking this guy here? Anything stand out to the draft that didn't have to do with your team?
Yeah, I thought it was wide receiver heavy at the beginning, which was a bit surprising to me. Or not the beginning, but the top half. A lot of those middle round guys just didn't fall.
The wide receiver dead zone, Howard.
The wide receiver dead zone. We talk about it often now.
Sure. Yeah. And so I like the 12 turn a lot better than the 1 turn. But yeah, you have to be a bit aggressive and you have to take some chances.
Yeah, which you did. And I think, and the other thing too is, like, even if you're not at the 12, you have to take chances to try to win $1 million. Not a ton, but like you gotta develop a level of uniqueness. If that's a word. I don't know if that's a word, but in order to win, and I think you certainly did that here.
It's always a word if we know what you meant when you said it. Right? That's what I always say.
I guess, yeah.
Well said.
I tend to try to pick a team. This wasn't one of them, but I try to pick a team where I get wild with it.
Was this a wild one?
This was not.
This
was pretty moderate, but like you start getting, you either go top 6 wide receivers, or you just start to get a little wonky because you have to have differentiation, or you're not going to have the shot at the big pot.
So you've done multiple drafts here in the main event as well as in the fantasy pros as well. What's the wackiest you've gone so far?
I started a draft with 3 tight ends in a fantasy pros.
I was just going to, when we were talking tight ends before, I'm like, I usually see somebody go tight end. Have not seen it yet this year, but you did it.
I did early on in a fantasy pros. I went Kelsey.
From what slot?
It was 2.
Okay.
Kelsey, Andrews, Hawkinson.
Yeah, that's beastly.
That's gonna be fun.
With two flexes and a tight end premium. That's beastly. I like that.
There's not going to be a lot of combinations with those 3 guys.
How did there maybe none for all I know. Yep. How did the rest of that team turn out? Like, were you okay with the running backs and receivers, or did they dry up faster than you wish they would have?
I remember correctly, and this is going back now a few weeks, but I went running backs was 6-7. So I grabbed the receiver in 4-5, running back 6-7, ended up with Miles Sanders. I'm going to test my memory here.
And you obviously waited on quarterback then too.
Waited a long time on quarterback.
Right.
I ended up getting Kirk Cousins though, so you can match him up with Hawkinson. We'll see what happens there. Quarterback's one of those things where you tell yourself you have to wait, and then you sit there at 4-2, and Lamar Jackson's sitting there, and you're just like, geez, I think I got to take, because that offense could be something special, and maybe it isn't. But when you look at what it could be, you just don't want to miss out on the boat. So you get tempted.
You do. I was talking with a player last night, and he had this is why, and you know this, Jared. This is why you go in with a plan, but you're ready to pivot off the plan, because these drafts very rarely go the way that you think. Yeah. They're not formulaic at all because of the dual flex and the tight end premium.
Yep.
And he said, I went in with the plan, and literally from rounds 3 through 8, a guy fell, and I couldn't believe he was there, and I had to take that guy every single time. Ended up with a completely different team than what he expected from the get-go. Something I'm sure you've experienced over the course of your career here.
Yeah, it happens all the time. And so what I always try to do is, there's a ton of tools out there. Obviously Fantasy Alarm, we're sitting here with Howard, so we've got to plug that, but there's a ton of tools out there where you can plug in, be creative, be unique, use your custom settings, and make sure as you're going through, you can deviate from the plan, but what you don't want to do is start to put yourself into what somebody else's plan is. And so, maybe you have to reach, or you have to fill a tight end because there's been a run, but doesn't mean you have to take the tight end whose ADP is a little higher than the guy you really like. Go with that guy, and that's going to lead to some people falling. But using these tools that are out there are going to be absolutely critical, because otherwise you get in this trap where, like, I got to take this guy because he's still there.
Yeah, no, I mean, you make a phenomenal point, and I think that and I agree with that completely. You get your guys, especially when you're picking on the wheel like that. That you're going to have to reach a little bit. Yeah. I did it in mine. When I double tapped the tight ends, I took Sam Laporta as the second tight end, and that was probably about 2 rounds before he was going. And people were like, well, why didn't you just wait on that? And because I didn't want to take that chance. So, Jared, I think you make great points here. And I think that these are fantastic lessons for people who are doing drafts. Maybe there's, people are still doing drafts this weekend here, besides here in the FFPC. So
we also have FFPC online main events, Jared, if you want to hop in one more.
I've already,
I know. I think it's like The Walking Dead.
I'm getting close to a 10-pack at this point. So
I think drafting online is much easier than it is drafting live. I mean, drafting live is a blast, obviously, but mentally it takes it out of you.
I like slows. I do too. I'll do slows starting in early July, just to kind of put my feet in the shallow end a little bit. But we're all smart come before the season starts, and then we see what happens.
Exposed as frauds.
fun to go back and play these things back and just see what see what we were right on and what we were wrong on. Because inevitably there'll be a lot of big misses too.
There's always going to be misses. Many hits as there are always misses. Well, Jared, thank you so much for joining us, man. Really appreciate you you joining us here and taking the time. Wishing you nothing but the best of luck in your quest for the $1 million prize.
Well, my pleasure, guys. It's been a pleasure joining you guys.
Are you on X or Twitter at all? X Twitter?
Yes, I am. I wouldn't say I'm an active.
That's fine. What's the X name?
It's the handle.
It's at Jared E22.
Jared E22. Follow him right now.
I have made a pact with myself to get more active with that and fantasy
football.
So
now follow the FFPC, the future FFPC millionaire.
I like
on
it.
Twitter.
That's right.
Very nice. All right. Jared Eisenlohr at Jared, JARED E22. Give him a follow. Root on his team. Absolutely. We're gonna look through a number of these other guests. Like, you can hear it going in the background right now. There is a ton of people. There's a lot of activity. Drafts have wound up. We're seeing draft boards all over the place, and we're going to grab another guy. What is going on here with the NFC North? We had Jared, who's a Lions fan. I'm stuck next to Balky here, who's a Packers truther, and now coming up right now, all decked out in his Chicago Bears gear, I got Scott Hoyt joining us here. Scott, welcome in. Thank you so much for joining us. First and foremost, tell everybody who you are, where you drafted from, and how many years have you been doing FFPC main events?
Well, thanks for having me. So if I tell you how many years I've been doing FFPC events, you're going to figure out how old I am. I did this before FFPC was even born.
You look 22. Come on, stop it, Scott.
I am. Yeah, just add a couple decades to that, and you're good. And I've actually been playing fantasy football since 1989.
USA Today newspaper days.
Faxing in lineups on a Friday night, and going every Monday and going, wait a minute, you missed 5 rushing yards here, so you need to change our points. And it was crazy. It was a crazy time. So yeah, I've been doing this from the very beginning. The FFPC, love this group. They do a phenomenal job. I was part of the old WCOF days.
I remember those.
Yeah, I won one of the big pots there. I was happy to do that, and I love fantasy football. It's a passion of mine. My wife lets me come every year.
Very nice when you've got the supportive spouse. 100%. Always great.
And here's a quick story. This is a true story. It was in our wedding vows that I was.
What?
It was. She was a big supporter of breast cancer. She does these big walks every year. I said, well, if you're going to put that and I have to support that, then you have to support my fantasy football passion. And it's in our vows.
Unbelievable.
I know.
What a woman.
I know.
I married the wrong woman, Howard. That's not in my wedding vows, unfortunately.
You know what? It's not in my wedding vows either, but my wife is 100% supportive. My wife plays now.
I need to get my wife in.
We have a family league and my wife plays as well.
Really? And she beats you every year, right?
I'm not going to admit that. The very first season we did about 7 years ago, she won the whole thing. She had somebody at work helping her, though, so I know that for a fact.
How many drafts did you do this weekend? I'm sorry.
I don't know, 5, 6.
5 or 6.
Yeah.
So it blurs together. How did this one that you just got done? How did that one rate with the others that you did?
Interesting, because I was at the 2 slot, and of course we're all prepared to take Jamar Chase, and the guy in first spot took Jamar Chase.
Yep.
And there I go. So what do you do? And his logic was solid. He said, listen, I don't want, because of the bye week 13, I don't want to deal with Jefferson in bye week 13 in the playoffs. And I'm thinking, I'll take him. It won't take me but 2 seconds to pick Justin Jefferson. And you got to win the league first to even worry about week 13. So you just load up a little bit on some of that protection in week 13 in your receiver base, and you go from there. I'll take Jefferson all day long there. But I understand the logic behind Chase. I do.
So do you have a copy of your team with you right here? Yeah. So we can let everybody know. We just had Jared Eisenlohr from the 12 spot. So now here we have Scott Hoyt's team here from the 2 hole. Give us a quick rundown of where you went.
Yeah. So at 2.11, we were going to hold for Higgins at the turn, because I'm thinking he took Chase. He's not going to take Higgins as well. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we said, well, let's just go grab Hurts here, even though we're going to target Hurts at 3.2. then let's grab Hurts now, and we'll get Higgins on the turn. We took Hurts. He pivoted. He took Higgins. So now he's got Chase and Higgins. And I'm going, okay, well, that was.
At least he did get Burrow. I'm looking at the board.
I know he didn't. He didn't. I thought I was playing best ball there for a second.
Exactly. Yes, it's exactly.
Wow. And then at the 3 term, you guys know this. I mean, the first 3 or 4 rounds pretty easy to do. I mean, you can't really screw it up too badly.
Everybody loves their team 5 rounds in.
I think everybody loves their team 20 rounds in until they start playing tomorrow.
Exactly right. So. I think this is an interesting because we've been talking about this guy a lot on the show today, and we saw him plummet in a lot of main events, but not in this draft.
Not at all. You know what? We're not even going to start him. I'm not starting Gibbs.
Yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs. Who we're talking about, by the way. Yeah.
I loved what I saw Thursday night was enough to say, listen, Detroit, you know darn well Detroit is going to get him more involved. They cannot not do that. That guy is shifty. He's elusive. He's fast. Now you see why he went in the number 10 overall pick. I mean, Detroit, I love Detroit, and I'm a Bears fan. I hate to say this, but I love Lions team. There's just something about their persona that I really like. And if we took Gibbs, I mean, it's, it was for us, it was maybe a little bit of I think he's probably going ADP, probably mid-3rd round, maybe in the 3rd.
Yeah, and then he slipped to the 4th in some drafts. Yeah,
because of what happened Thursday night.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's 1 week.
Right.
I'm not really.
And Dan Campbell actually came out and said today that the limited touches for Gibbs was by design. Now, it would have been nice to have known that heading into week 1, but for him to turn
competitive advantage. Yeah, sure.
If we could get that every week from every coach, we'd be doing pretty well, wouldn't we?
We would. We definitely would.
And then at that point, once you start getting past, round 3, round 4, now you start looking for filling out your roster the best way you can with value.
So you got Aaron Jones in the late 4th.
And I'll tell you what about Aaron Jones.
I know you're a Bears fan.
I'm a Bears fan. For me to take a line and then back it up with a Packer, hard to do. But Aaron Jones,
Justin Jefferson with your first pick.
All loaded up in the NFC North again.
And go look at my roster. See if you can find a Bear in there. There's not a Bear in there. There's a Chicago Bear in there. Now that I think about it, that's kind of funny.
Yeah, that's weird. That's weird how it worked out. But Jones, I think that guy's undervalued every year.
So do I, and I've had him in many drafts in years past, and he never disappoints. And I think with the Watson news again, I don't know what's going to happen with Watson. I just felt like he's going to be a focus, and he was basically sat down the preseason. They want to put plastic wrapper on that guy, and so I think they're going to give him. I think they're going to give him everything they can handle.
I think so. That was Aaron Jones, receiver with your next 2 picks. Mike Williams out of Los Angeles, Gabe Davis, the receiver for Buffalo. I think that that's a player to me. Howard and I were talking about this earlier. We're loving on Dalton Kincaid. Maybe not so much Gabe Davis, but maybe there's some value with Davis.
So I had Davis last year, and we all got disappointed. But he played hurt most of the year. You saw what he did the year before. The guy, Diggs, is going to get all that attention in that offense. And if Kincaid's going to play out of the slot, Davis is going to run. I mean, I feel like there's good value there. And you're in a high potent offense. So I'd rather have a high potent offense as opposed to somebody like taking somebody from Tampa Bay or Arizona. It's like, why not?
Draft players on teams that score touchdowns, right?
Yeah, exactly. And, I think at the end of the day, I mean, I didn't think there's any great value there at that point. So it's okay. I'll go Davis. Mike Williams for me was probably the biggest reach I made. But again, I'm going to the Chargers offense.
Elite offense, for sure.
Whenever you have any question in your mind looking at your draft board, always pivot to that. I always default to that. Always do.
And it makes sense. Kellen Moore, we know that he loves to have his receivers and tight ends targeted. It's one of the reasons why I'm kind of down on Austin Eckler this year, because Kellen Moore does not like his quarterbacks to check down. You keep looking downfield. So I love the Mike Williams pick.
Yeah. And then from there, you can see.
So just to bring the viewers in on this, Cam Akers was the pick in the 7th round. Tyler Higbee in the 8th. At the end of the 8th, that's pretty good value there.
Yeah.
Sam Laporta right after that in the early 9th.
Oh, I love that.
Okay, so I got to call you out on this, Scott. You're a Bears fan, and Howard, we continue this. Look at this. Okay, so Laporta the Lion on your team. Lazard, the former Packer, on your team.
I know you're going. I knew you.
And then Romeo Doubs, another Packer, right after that. This is like the self-hating Bears fans team.
You do, Scott, you do realize that there are multiple divisions in the NFL. You don't always have to take guys from the NFC North. You know that, right?
Until you guys pointed it out, I just didn't realize that.
You're in the zone, the drafting zone.
I guess I better go change my sweatshirt. Like,
well, you might have to at that point. So that was that. We're at that was the 11th round. But Rashee Rice, conversely, a guy that probably outperformed expectations on Thursday night.
Absolutely. And listen, I don't think Tony and I don't think Sky Moore are going to have a shitty game like that. Excuse me, a bad game like they did. It's not going to happen.
We're not regulated by the FCC, so we're good.
And Rice looks the part. He's kind of a gadget guy. He looks the part. And again, in a high potent offense, you don't know at any given week who Mahomes is going to target. It's a value pick. I mean, he's my wide receiver 5 or 6. So why not take a chance on that?
In the back half of that draft, from round 11 on, did you have a favorite pick? Did you have a guy that, man, I'm really glad he made it to me, that you think could be a difference maker on this squad this year?
And I've done this a lot this year. The guy that I've drafted very late in the rounds is Kareem Hunt, because I know, with the contract situation after the first game, Kareem Hunt's going to find a job somewhere, and it's probably going to be at a decent club where he's going to find. After tomorrow, there's going to be an injury or two. It happens every year. So that was kind of one of those where, we kind of targeted, but the guy, maybe not so much in the 12th or 13th round, but the one tight end that I've been targeting a lot this year is Laporta. And what I saw Thursday night kind of reaffirmed in my head what I was thinking. He looked like he had Hawkinson's number. He looked like a TJ Hawkinson out there, only quicker. So I love Laporta. I targeted him a lot of drafts.
Howard, I love the Higbee Laporta combo there.
I love Higbee Laporta. Listen, that's the tight end range that I have been living in this entire offseason. It's Higbee, it's Laporta, it's Dalton Schultz. Like, these are the names, because you don't have to spend the draft capital that you spend on a Dallas Goedert or even a Pat Freiermuth for that amount. And these are guys who are going to be heavy targets in their offensive scheme. You want a tight end who's either going to be number 2 or number 3 in the target share of that team, and you're getting that with Higbee and Laporta, 100%.
Well, and you add the news of Kupp today going on the IR. Higbee is going to have to be.
By the way, just speaking of the Kupp thing, did that news hit after he had already been selected?
It did.
Okay.
And the guy next to me, in one spot, had taken. I think we took him in like around 6 or 7. It's good value, but now he's gone for 4 weeks. So he also took Jonathan Taylor too.
There you go. Not mitigating any kind of risk whatsoever.
You zig, they zag, right?
Well, Scott, thank you so much for taking some time, joining us here. Wishing you nothing but the best here in your quest for the $1 million championship. And go NFC North, right?
Except my Bears.
Except the Bears. Except for the Bears.
I can tell you, I listen to you all the time. Do it.
Oh, excellent. Thank you.
Serious. I love your show.
I appreciate that very much, Scott. Thank you.
Scott Hoyt, OG on fantasy football, high stakes fantasy football play. Are you playing in the varsity coming up?
I'm not.
You're not? Okay.
I'm not.
Anyway, I've facilitated that draft and you've been in it.
I know. I've been in many times.
Well, congratulations on a successful drafting season. Good luck this year.
Thanks, Paul.
Absolutely. Scott Hoyt, one of my favorites out at the FFPC every single year. Good to hang out with him and pick his brain. Higbee Laporta. That might be my favorite part of that draft, where probably Jefferson at the 2 is probably my favorite part. And then you have a guy like Higbee and Laporta to be that combo tight end there. Good draft by Scott Hoyt for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. We are joined now here coming out of her draft. That's right. It's Angela Pellini, who, much to my chagrin, is all decked out in her Cowboys gear. My co-host on Fantasy Alarm, Jim Bowden, he lives and dies by his Cowboys. She's got the Dak Prescott jersey going. Angela, thank you so much for joining us, first of all. And how about them Cowboys?
We will see. We will see.
I mean,
did you draft a bunch of them today?
Well, I haven't drafted yet. I drafted.
Oh, you're about
2.
to. Oh, okay.
Well, I actually wasn't going to do a third draft this season until I found out you were going to be here today. And then I said, well, I guess I got to come back. And if I got to come back, well, I may as well do a third one.
Well, Howard Bender brings everybody in,
right?
For sure.
Yeah. Well, that's why I wore all my Cowboys gear. You know, I just want to make sure you were feeling the love.
I am definitely feeling the love here. Absolutely. All right. So you are a Dallas Cowboys fan. In the drafts that you've done so far, listen, we made CeeDee Lamb the cover boy of the Fantasy Alarm Draft Guide this year for a very specific reason. We feel that breakout coming for him. Talk to me about your Dallas Cowboys offense and how invested are you right now in Lamb, in Pollard, in Dak Prescott?
Well, ironically, you actually blocked me from even being able to get CeeDee Lamb. So I'm a little bit upset about that. I did, however, have the opportunity. Yeah, because you told everybody this guy's going to be great. I did get Pollard once. I got to tell you, I love Dak, but I don't know. I don't know. I mean, he's been struggling quite a bit. And, when you look around at other, I don't want to say aging, but, aging quarterbacks, and you look at the progression they've had over the last couple of seasons, I guess it's not progression, it's regression. And I don't know. I'm almost more inclined to draft Anthony Richardson than Dak Prescott.
Does that affect the way that you draft the other Cowboys skill position players, that you have this wavering faith in Prescott this year, or is it not really a factor for you?
It's not really a factor because one of my guys that I don't know why I think he's going to go back to his 1,000-yard seasons is Brandon Cooks.
Yes.
So I've been shooting for Cooks. I think I got him out of probably 60% of my drafts. I got him in 75% of my best balls because, I mean, the guy's got it. It's just a matter of coverage, Dak's ability to get the ball where it needs to be, and McCarthy's new way of, calling plays.
Cooks is one of those guys who thrives as the number 2 receiver.
Yep.
He doesn't need to be the number 1. You put him as the number 2. Let the coverage drift over to CeeDee Lamb. I think you're completely right here. I think I actually said something on air that I've got a foam football that if Brandon Cooks does not hit that 1,000-yard mark, I will eat it on camera and have to digest a Nerf football.
Ooh, I definitely have to watch that.
Leah, I don't want to see it. So I hope Cooks hits the 1,000 yards because that could be really bad for your health. I mean, there's a lot of things I put in my body that I probably shouldn't. That is something I'd never put in my body, Howard.
If he dies, he dies.
No, I think you have a good bet going there. I don't think you're going to eat the football, but does the person you made the bet against have to eat it if Brandon gets 1,000 yards?
No, I just said flat out. I said to the world, if Brandon Cooks does not hit that 1,000-yard mark, I will eat it on camera, and that's just it. I believe in him that much. I'm with you. I have him in several spots as well. So your draft is actually your new draft is actually starting up right now, or in a couple of minutes.
Yeah, 2 o'clock.
2 o'clock.
2 o'clock. And I actually brought my young draft protege here. My husband's out of town, and she's doing her first live FFPC draft.
Oh, this is fantastic! You guys are combining forces here.
Oh God, no! I won't listen to a thing she says.
She's wearing a Texans jersey.
Why
would we do that?
What draft slot do you have this afternoon?
I have 2.
2. Okay, interesting.
And here's what's interesting. Yesterday I had 3, and I was lucky enough to have Jamar Chase fall to me because nothing personal, but I don't trust McCaffrey. I don't have a single share of a guy. I don't. No more faith.
Is it because of all the injuries over the years? Or
yeah.
Okay.
I'm 50 now. Well, I'm 51. And I got to tell you, you get older, things hurt. You know what I mean? And I can't imagine it being any better for somebody that's getting beat up on a daily basis.
So when you had the 3, it went Jefferson, McCaffrey, and then you took Chase?
Yeah.
That's how it went? Okay.
Yep.
So now today, you're guaranteed to get Jefferson or Chase. Is that the plan?
Well, actually, this is kind of great. Maybe I could ask you guys for some help on this one because I don't know. Do I want all my eggs in the Chase basket? Do I want to take Tyreek 2 overall? I don't know.
I have seen Tyreek Hill go 1 overall in a Fantasy Pros championship. So it's not like it'd be crazy. Saturday afternoon drafting at the FFPC main event, live events here in Planet Hollywood is when crazy stuff happens. Like, as you know, you've already done a bunch of drafts. There's a bunch of people in there that's done a bunch of drafts. They're looking to vary things up a little bit.
Exactly.
So it's not crazy to do it here. I think personally, if you want, we're not going to be talking about ADP or where players went in a month or so. So if you're a little bit nervous, if Jefferson goes 1, and if you're nervous about having 2 teams with Chase that high, take Tyreek Hill. Why not? Right?
Yeah, that's where I'm leaning. And if who's drafting 1 in my league is listening and they'd like to block my Tyreek Hill pick, I'm fine with that.
No consideration whatsoever for a Bijan Robinson, huh?
I got Bijan in my first FFPC on 8 pick. on Thursday.
Angela, when this show is over, I'm going to give you an awkwardly long hug.
Oh my God, I can't wait. I'm so excited.
Well, Angela, go get yourself ready. Enjoy the draft. But yes, when this show is over, I'm coming over. Awkwardly long hug. We'll get a little picture together. We'll hang out for sure. No doubt about it.
Hey, thank you guys so much. And thanks for everything you do. You bring a smile to my face every single day.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Angela Pellini about to go dominate her draft from the 2 spot.
That's back-to-back guests with the 2 slot here on the show, which is interesting. And it's the first one we've had who's about to draft rather than somebody who's already got it done. So it's all pep and excitement and thrills for Angela right now. We'll see how she feels after the draft. Probably a little bit exhausted, but I'm sure that awkwardly long hug is going to carry and carry her, buoy her spirits up for the remainder of the draft.
All right. Well, coming up, joining us right now, it's Jamie Pearson. It is at Pearson Jamie on the old Twitter machine. You'll be able to see that right here on the screen if you're looking on the YouTube page. Jamie, what's going on? How was your draft today? Where did you draft from? And let's talk your team.
Both of yours here from the Ohio area. We had the 7 slot. And, looking back on it, I was pretty happy with that. We decided to go down Mr. Robinson's neighborhood in Atlanta to start.
Yep.
I kept thinking LaDainian Tomlinson and some of those years he had with the touchdowns or receiving. I think I might have heard on your program that Atlanta didn't make a 6th round. What was he? 6th round overall?
Eighth overall.
8 overall for nothing. So, started that way, and then we wanted a unique build, so we went Olave too, maybe a little high on some people's boards, but
that high, I don't think. I think that's a solid pick. I've seen him go. That would have been the 206. Like that's fine.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that.
And then wanted a tight end on the way back. A little leery with the Waller injury news, but pulled the trigger with old Darren Waller, hoping he can catch a lot of passes in New York.
When you picked Waller, was he the 3rd tight end off the board? Like, was Hawkinson still available?
Hawkinson went first pick of the 3rd round.
Oh, wow.
That's who we targeted. And so the injury scared us off, but we wanted to get one of those guys. And so we went with Waller, and we were pretty happy with that. Hopefully the injury, I think the hamstrings is going to be okay. So
the last report that I saw was they said that they didn't think it was that serious. And one of the things that Eric and I have been talking about, when you're grabbing these tight ends, you want a guy who's, at least the 2nd or 3rd target on that offense. Darren Waller is going to be the number 1 target in this offense. It's not going to Isaiah Hodgins. It certainly isn't going to go to Wan'Dale Robinson or any of those guys. So, all right. So far, we got Bijan, we got Chris Olave, we got Darren Waller. We got some solid build here. Keep going.
So we really wanted to try to target Amari Cooper, but he was the first pick of the 4th round. So we settled for DJ Moore with that next pick. A favorite of ours last year, Tyler Lockett. Everybody likes the rookie. I'm a Columbus guy, but Tyler Lockett is sneaky every single year. He seems to deliver what he does. And so then we went quarterback, and this was really tough for me because I'm a giant Cincinnati Bengal fan, and Joe Burrow's sitting there. But with having DJ Moore, felt like we had to go with Fields. So I hope that one doesn't come back to bite us, but I passed on my guy Joey B and went with the Chicago quarterback. So I don't know your thoughts on that.
It's interesting. I don't think it's a bad pick. I think the fact that you had DJ Moore, it makes it a lot more palatable. There's no guarantee that Burrow finishes as a better quarterback than Fields this year. The ADP would dictate that. I'm looking at it right now. Main events over the last 24 hours. Burrow's going at the end of the 4th, it looks like, end of the 4th, and then Fields going in the early 6th. So it's about a round difference, which, again, it's Saturday at the FFPC. Crazy stuff happens. Not that was crazy. So I could be on board with that Fields pick for sure.
I can 100% be on board with it. And listen, I get you want the pairing. A lot of people do that. It's not, you're not going full blown stack here. I'm not gonna hear you say that, you also locked in Chase Claypool or Darnell Mooney, or at least I hope you don't say that. But when you look at a situation like what we see with Justin Fields right now, my friend John Mpemba, who does all the quarterback work over at Fantasy Alarm, did this whole, breakdown, this association of what happened with Jalen Hurts and what's happened with Justin Fields. And they did exactly what they did with Fields this year that the Eagles did with Hurts. They went out and they traded for a number 1 wide receiver. You already know that they're secondary and tertiary receivers. You already know that you've got a good pass catching tight end in Cole Kmet. What's that final piece to the puzzle? You're not going to hinder his running at all. Now you've got him a number one wideout. So I am not going to complain about the Justin Fields pick one bit.
Good. So I think if you look at the rest of our team, we went that rock strong running back with Robinson at the first, and then we really punted the position. I think we're going to be throwing P. Ryan out there week one, which maybe is not ideal, but like I said, we spent on quarterback, we spent on tight end, so we knew with a strong running back with Robinson that we knew we were going to have to punt on that position until later on. So 9th round, I think we went the kid from Miami, A-Chain.
That's Eric's boy.
My guy. Didn't realize he was my guy until I looked at all my teams and like, wow, I have this guy everywhere. So that's fine. Yeah. The other thing too, talking about the P. Ryan thing, we talked about at the top of the show, Javonte Williams is going to be on a snap count. So that bodes well for you guys for week one with P. Ryan.
Yep. And then went with the lottery ticket and Elijah Mitchell. So our thought was we got the really good running back, and then we have some guys that if, things fall in our favor, we got some other guys to plug in there. But, hopefully, Robinson can score plenty for us. So we'll see how that ends up.
Also, Cortland Sutton on this team too, Howard.
Oh, yeah. Somebody's been drinking the Howard Bender Kool-Aid, no doubt about it. Listen, I love Cortland Sutton. I mean, if you've listened to Fantasy Alarm, then you know what I'm talking about here. The X-receiver in a Joe Lombardi offense, the targets get funneled his way. We saw it with Marquez Colston, Michael Thomas. We saw it with Mike Williams the last 2 seasons. Yum. Give me some Cortland Sutton. I'm all in on that pick. Keep going, Balky. Give me the rest of that.
Well, Sutton has a number 4 too, which is really good. Number 4 receiver. So Chiga Okonkwo also on this squad. Tyler Boyd, Zach Moss, DJ Chark, the Ravens D, Tyler Bass, Deontay Foreman, and then rounding up with Rashid Shaheed and Ryan Tannehill as the backup to Fields. Sneaky little stack there, Okonkwo and Tannehill, which is interesting.
We were trying to do just that. We thought, do we go quarterback here? Do we go lottery ticket? But the quarterbacks were being snatched up. So that's exactly what we did. We wanted to have that stack for down the road if we needed it.
I think what's compelling about this team, Howard, is elite tight end, obviously elite quarterback, top 1, 2. Oh no, Sutton's the 4. Top 5 receivers are really good. Olave, Moore, Lockett, Sutton, Burks. I don't want to say the weakness, but maybe the team that you have the part that you have the least amount of depth, or the least most amount of work to do is running back, which is the way I do when I do drafts. Like if I know I can't be dominant everywhere. I got to be weak somewhere. That second running back is usually where I want to be weakest at, because you have Robinson on there, and then you can kind of piecemeal it, right? Where you don't necessarily have to have the most talented guy at second running back. You just have to have the guy with the opportunity. A-Chain, P. Ryan, Mitchell, Moss, and Foreman. All those guys you would think throughout the season will have these windows of opportunity. That's when you deploy them, and the rest of your team is very strong.
You always have to accept the fact that you're going to short yourself somewhere. And if that's RB2, that's not a big deal, especially when you've got a receiving core like that you're going to start your 2 wide receivers, and then you're going to throw 2 wide receivers into your flex spots so that, if there is one spot that you're going to be short, it's the RB2 spot. I have no issues with that whatsoever. I like that build. I like that build a lot.
Well, and, kind of as we look through this, we like the matchup, I think, week 17, and we're looking way ahead. So when we win the $1 million, we're going to be ready to go. I think we have Atlanta, I think week 17, maybe plays the Saints. So,
okay.
All right. Thinking ahead. But
how, if you were a draft professor, what grade would you give this team? Is it an A grade? Is it good enough to get an A? Borderline A minus, AB, whatever the kids call it now.
I'm confident in our team. I'm going to give us an A minus. There's work to be done.
Draft grades. Don't give me those draft grades.
Absolutely. Yeah, because you want to know. Like, here's the thing, and Jamie, I don't know if you've run into this. After a draft is over, it's euphoria. I feel like I got all the picks right, and I feel great about it. And then I'll go back a couple of days later. I'm like, God, what the hell was I thinking? Like, that just was not, and then it gets progressively worse. It's that euphoria wears off. But right after the draft, I better feel good about my team. Otherwise, I really screwed it up.
Yep. And then something else, and I don't know what the other people you've interviewed have looked at. There were all those Jonathan Taylors, Cooper Kupps. We tried to stay away from those iffy guys. My other rule was no ACL injuries. So we tried to dodge some of those. If you're playing for $1 million, you better not take chances. You better be as solid as you can. And that was some of the stuff that we did. And so, we might regret it, but, we don't have any of those risky guys. But, we'll see.
We touched on this earlier. Injuries happen over the course of the season. Your guys will get hurt. Don't compound that with taking players who are already hurt, who are already dealing with stuff. You're going to have enough to deal with. Everybody's going to have enough to deal with that over the course of the season. You don't need to give yourself, week one headaches, which is, what some people are doing. That's why Taylor is slipping. That's why Kupp is slipping, because that's the attitude people have. So, yeah.
All right. Well, Jamie, thank you so much for joining us here. Again, we appreciate it. I'm going to have to give Jamie Pearson a follow on Twitter at PearsonJamie. And we can check in with you throughout this entire season en route to $1 million win.
We'll be listening. That's for sure.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Thanks,
Jamie
guys.
Pearson.
Wow. I'm telling you, man, I'm listening to all these builds. I like seeing this. We've gotten a 12. We've gotten a couple of 2s. Now we get a 7. It's going to be interesting to figure out, does draft position matter to you?
Not to me. I mean, like I was talking about drafting in Kentucky, I try to, because you actually use your fab to bid on your draft slot out there.
Mm-hmm.
I try to get every slot I can with all my drafts. I want to draft from everyone. I draft from the 1, the 2, the 3, because it's all different builds. And that's what makes it so much fun. I want to make sure that I'm building as many unique teams as possible. For me, I guess it matters. And it matters that I want to be as diverse as possible. Some of the best players in the FFPC over the years, you'll talk to them and say, it doesn't matter. Like, I'll draft from anywhere. I will draft from the 1. I'll draft from the 5, the 6, the 10. It doesn't matter for me. I'm going to be able to build a dominant team no matter where I'm at. And I think that's sort of the attitude that you have to have. You have to have the attitude like, I'm good enough to compete no matter where I'm slotted.
I agree with you completely. If you can't draft from any spot, I don't know what you're doing. I honestly don't know what you're doing. Bringing in our next guest right now. If you guys follow me on Twitter at RotoBuzzGuy, you know exactly what this gentleman looks like, because he busted out the Fantasy Alarm cheat sheet pre-draft. Let's see how that ended up. John O'Donnell joining us here right now. Did I pronounce the last name correct? Orduño.
Yes.
John Orduño. There you go. I got to make sure I get that pronounced properly.
Yep.
So John, where did you draft from? What spot did you draft from? And how do you like your team so far?
I would draft from the 6th spot, and me and my partner Claudia. So if we feel like we have a pretty good team, although the team next to us must have had your cheat sheet, because they took about 5 of our players. We had to set in the queue 2 players, and it just seemed like, give you an example, we drafted Bijan, went to your advice and stuff in 6th spot, came around, everyone was gone. Olavi was coming up, and we had him set in the queue. Olavi was taken, so we didn't take in Jacobs. It's our 2 spot right after that.
Oh, all right. There you go. See, that's the first running back I've heard so far in the people that we've talked about here. So let's get the full rundown of your team here. Let us know where you went. Bijan, Jacobs. Talk to me here about the rest of the way.
After that, because wide receivers are going like crazy in our draft, particular draft. They were going left and right. So we ended up taking Keenan Allen in the 3rd spot, coming back around.
Love it.
And then 4th spot, we want to get another wide receiver. So it was either DJ Moore and Hopkins. We decided to go Hopkins because paid him big bucks, big incentives and stuff. He's no one receiver. Decided to go with him.
I love the fact that you can start off running back, Howard. And then in a draft where the receivers are going crazy, you can still get Keenan Allen and DeAndre, 2 target hogs there. Those are phenomenal picks in the 3rd and 4th.
Absolutely.
Okay, then we stuck with another receiver. We went after Kirk in the 4th round.
Love him. We talked about that earlier. Everybody's focused on Calvin Ridley. I've got a ton of Trevor Lawrence paired up with Christian Kirk because they've got that rapport. So,
well, we almost had Trevor Lawrence. Again, we were going to pick him in the 7th round, and he was taken just before our pick. So that was another pick, the guys next door. So we went back to running back. We ended up getting Cam Akers.
Mm-hmm.
And then we went
another 3. Yeah, Cam Akers a 3. Nice job.
Yeah.
I love this.
So then after that, we went after Michael Thomas because he was sitting there in the 1, 2, 3, 4. What's the 6th spot, 7th spot there?
Yep. 6. Yep.
Yeah.
No, 7. No,
7
I apologize.
Spot.
Yeah, 7.
7 spots.
And then like the tight end of the show, if there's a tight end mascot on the show, It's Tyler Higbee, and that's who they got right here in the 8th round as your starting tight end, which I love.
This team sounds so
Hey,
nice.
so I followed you and stuff. Obviously, we couldn't get the top guys. So with Cup being on IR, which we knew and stuff, he's going to get the targets.
Yes.
So that's why we went to Higbee.
Tua Tagovailoa.
Thank you.
Which again,
even if it's printed, I have a tough time reading.
But so we wanted to get Trevor. We couldn't. Then me and Claudia talked about, and we looked at your chart. So we're going, hey, if we get Tua, and we were thinking Kirk Cousins later on. It's a safe bet. Tua high, because of the injury thing. So that's when we went and got Tua at that point in time, because we're looking at your sheet. So we'll go grab him, maybe grab Kirk and stuff. Obviously, Kurt was gone the next round over, so we couldn't do that. But we were trying to follow your sheet. It's what was safe, which is high end. And so we got Tua at that point. And then, I'm sorry, good.
Van Jefferson, Rashee Rice, another couple of popular receivers.
Wait for the points.
Absolutely. Irv Smith at tight end. Is that Ezekiel Elliott?
Yes,
Ezekiel Elliott. Okay. Then you're looking at Zamir White again, another injury away type guy. Russell Wilson to back up Tua Tagovailoa. Okay.
Which is great. There you go. That's the yin yang that we talk about. You get somebody who is a safe, high floor QB like you get with Russell Wilson, and then you pair him up with a high upside guy like Tua. This is a blueprint here of the Fantasy Alarm cheat sheet. I'm digging on this.
Again, that was on your sheet, high, low, and stuff like that. That's why we went after that. So I was following that. And then we went after defense and kicker. Cowboys defense and Buckhart for the points.
Yeah, you're talking about elite kicker and an elite defense. I know Jim Bowden thinks they're an elite defense, and they are.
They are an elite defense. Let's face facts. I mean, this defense for the Cowboys. I mean, you got ball hawkers sitting in the secondary, and you've got at least probably the best defensive player in Micah Parsons,
a huge playmaker out there. Alec Pierce,
yes, Pierce,
Mike Gesicki, and Hunter Renfrow to end it up the end of the draft.
Can we cut John the $1 million check right now?
Well, wait. Listen, we've been cutting everybody the $1 million check on this show.
So we've said that we've been rooting for people.
Oh, we're rooting, but this
is saying cut the check. Just cut this check right now.
I'll take it right now.
The thing is, when you're going by Howard's rankings and Howard's beliefs, man, he better like it, because if he doesn't like it, there's a disconnect there somehow. I actually, Howard's opinions aside, I really like this team. I go back to that 3rd and 4th round, the Keenan Allen, DeAndre Hopkins grab there. You get Cam Akers as your number 3 to get a guy like Higbee, and then Tagovailoa, and then you get the high floor guy and Wilson too. It's a really good draft. It's a really, really good draft.
I really appreciate that.
Fantastic.
Very much so. Just want to add something too, just a special thing. I've been doing this for 22 years. My partner died last year. And when I asked you before the draft if BJ was a pick, and you said yes, you go after him and said, that's the guy you should get. Ironically, my partner's name is Howard. So when I remember, it's like, oh my God, Howard just told me Howard to pick this guy. So I had to go with it and stuff. I had a feeling my friend is talking through you. So that's why, another reason, because and you liked Howard. You liked Bijan. So we went after Bijan in that 6th pick.
I love it.
Fantasy fate. I love it.
I love it. John, thank you. John Orduño, everybody. John, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate you joining us here on the show. And again, cut this guy the check right now.
We'll get the big check. We got to have a big check laying around here.
Check here. $1 million going to my man, John. John, thank you so much for joining us here on the show.
Thank you for both of you. Great show.
Unbelievable. Ladies and gentlemen, we are wrapping up coverage here at the FFPC Players Championship in Planet Hollywood in Las Vegas. There are more drafts to come, more fun stuff here. Balky, this has been an absolute pleasure getting a chance to hang out with you here in Vegas.
Yeah. And I will say to all the viewers out there, if we talk to a lot of people drafting. If you still want to draft with the FFPC, myffpc.com is where to go. We have fewer than 200 spots left in the main event. We just announced, and I feel like I'm breaking some news, Sunday morning main event drafts happening tomorrow morning. So we're going to have those. These are online only, not live, so you can draft them from the comfort of your, bed, probably, given how early we're going to have them tomorrow morning. But you can draft them at home, as well as the Fantasy Pros Championship, our mid-stakes contest, just $350 to enter that Sunday morning drafts. And then obviously drafts all the way through tonight. tonight. So there's still time to draft more teams. MyFFPC.com is where to go for that. What a fun ride this has been with you this afternoon.
This has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for inviting me. Thanks for having me. Thank you to everybody out there who's drafted. Thank you so much to everybody who's watched, threw some questions into the chat. This has been an absolute blast. So signing off here from Las Vegas at Planet Hollywood for the FFPC Players Championship main event. He's Eric Balkman. I'm Howard Bender. We'll catch you next time.